Vince Palamara. And if you're not familiar with his work, we have got the link to his book in the description box. And he's the author of JFK Conspiracy and the Secret Service. We put a poll out as to whether you guys believe the Secret Service agent stood down, and the vast majority of you guys do. So the first question for Vince then is, what got you into this, my friend? What's your backstory? Can you hear me?
Yeah, just when I was the age of 12 in 19... Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, keep going. Yeah, we can hear you fine, Vince. Everything's fine. Keep going.
Okay, there's a little bit of maybe I should get out of the YouTube and just... Okay.
Have you got it open twice somewhere?
There we go. Okay, I've got it. Perfect. You hear me still? Everything good?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that technical difficulty. Yeah, okay. So at the age of 12 in 1978, that happened to be during the House Select Committee reinvestigation of the JFK assassination. Again, I was only 12 years old. I became fascinated with the Kennedy assassination, and in particular the Secret Service, because it might seem incongruous, but at the same time, there were reruns of a 19th century fictional show about the Secret Service called The Wild Wild West, still my favorite show to this day. So I took a special interest in the Secret Service. So when I was seeing like the Zapruder film, the Nix film, other films and photos, I had a tendency to look past President Kennedy and look around in the agents and the limousine or by him and whatnot, and just was fascinated by what their actions were, and it turned out their actions and inactions. My mom and dad being big fans of President Kennedy, they were married a couple months before the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they just were fascinated by his life and his death. So it transferred on to me, and lo and behold, as the years went by, the 25th anniversary is really when I began to get serious. From the age of 12 up to that point, it was more just like secondary sources and whatnot. But it really lit a fire under my behind in 1988 to really start to try to find these former agents and do something about this. And in fact, the late Dr. Cyril Wecht, also from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my hometown, he called me out of the blue one time in 1991 and says, you should try to find these men if you can. That would be really fascinating because very few, if any of us, have done this. So I was just, okay, I got to do this. So leading up to the present time, now it's like about 80 former agents later, many of whom have since passed away. So it's like, thank God I got them on the record. I mean, we're talking Jerry Bain, the special agent in charge of the White House detail, all his assistants, most of the agents who were in Dallas and other trips. And what I found was, this is my big tagline, is that, now I do believe there was a conspiracy, but conspiracy or no conspiracy, Oswald or no Oswald, if the Secret Service would have done their normal professional job, Kennedy lives. And this is not Monday morning quarterbacking through rose-colored glasses circa 2025 security. No, this is security from FDR through and including JFK. Kennedy should have lived. So that's what brought me through. Well, it's going to be 7 books. I have a final book coming out this year. It's basically a streamlined version of the first book with a few additional things called President Kennedy Should Have Survived Dallas.
So this started when you was 12. You just said, you believe now that there is a conspiracy. But from that young age, did you originally believe what had been reported in the news?
Not really, because, I had a conservative look on it. I used to think that it was Oswald and Ruby and it was a mafia conspiracy, a very conservative amount of people involved, and the agencies were really just the mafia. And what it really boiled down to is my mom and dad were basically conspiracy believers too. They said that when they saw, my dad basically said, I could stomach a lone nut on the 22nd, but on the 24th, when Jack Ruby stepped forward and took out Oswald, all bets were off. And he said, he looked at, my mom, and he said, something's wrong here. Something's wrong. And then when they heard the details through the years, now, the one thing they did say is, now I have hours and hours of ABC, NBC, and CBS video footage from that day and also the weekend. And they said that, boy, you're showing me a lot of things I did not realize. They said that 10 people could have killed Kennedy that day. We were so consumed with grief that all those details you're laying on me now went in one ear, not the other. And I think that was the success of the assassination, because back in 1963, people believed the government in the media, almost like the word of God. And there was no internet, there was no paparazzi or, tabloid press. There was no like this, like today, everything's social media. People check, double check, quadruple check ad infinitum. But back then, it was like, well, the government is saying only 3 shots were fired, and you're kind of powerless to do anything. All you have is newspapers, the radio, and no way to really record anything. So brings it up to the present day. That's a long-winded way of saying, yes, I started.
No, I completely relate. All we had here was the BBC One news station and a couple of other stations, and whatever they said was gold. So you go on this interesting journey then of starting to speak to Secret Service people. I mean, how does one even approach them? And aren't they prohibited from revealing things to people?
No, when they're in retirement, especially before any books by Gerald Blaine and Clint Hill were written, which were actually because of me. We'll get to that maybe later. But that was at a time they were in retirement, so they were just collecting their government pensions, and it was their own free will whether they wanted to answer anything, answer the phone, respond to me, and whatnot. But again, in the very early 1990s, people got to remember, this is really before the internet. I know technically it was computer bulletin boards, but for all intents and purposes, in 1991, 1992, most people had never heard of the internet. So I was going through old phone directory assistance, newspaper archives, dredging microfiche and trying to find where these gentlemen lived. And so I always tell people, like, David Lifton's big moment in the case was when he got the cyber Neil report showing a surgery of the head area. That was his big coming out, so to speak. Mine was September 27th, 1992, when I spoke to the head of the White House detail, Gerald Bain, B-E-H-N. And he was actually pretty friendly guy. He's considered talking to a stranger on the phone. I was only like 26 at the time. And so I was I'll make this story real short. And what really just flabbergasted me, up to that time, I begrudgingly believed some of the things that were laid out by authors, by William Manchester, Jim Bishop, even the Warren Report, that, President Kennedy didn't want the agents off the back of the car. He didn't want the bubble top. Maybe he was a little bit to blame for the lack of security. I started to maybe believe that stuff, begrudgingly. So I laid it on. Keep in mind, it's the number one agent of Kennedy's detail. He had Kennedy's ear. He was there. In fact, he was there from FDR up to including LBJ. So I asked him, said, yeah, I've been reading some of these books, and the Warren Report says that President Kennedy had ordered the agents off the car, and he cut me off. And he said, I don't remember Kennedy ever saying anything about not having agents on the back of the car. If you look at the newsreels, you'll see agents on there. I immediately got cotton-mouthed. I just could not believe what I was hearing. He was only 76 at the time. He was very lucid, very bright, no problems there. And I was just shocked. He told me something else shocking, too. We'll get to that in a moment about the motorcade route. But the bottom line was when he told me that, and after I got the phone and we exchanged pleasantries, he told me some other things that were interesting. That was the big thing. I got the phone. I immediately started to think about, as a defense attorney, I said to myself, well, Vince, that's tantalizing. That's amazing. But someone out there could say, Vince, it's just one lone man out in the wilderness, albeit the number one agent. How do we know he wasn't senile? Come on, Vin. How do you know? So you got to think like that. They're the other side. Well, lo and behold, when I started to contact a lot of his colleagues from all across the country, again, this is before they were comparing notes so they could go on the internet and see who I was and that, they were all telling me the same thing. It was like they were reading two parts. They were all telling me President Kennedy was a very nice man, never interfered with their actions at all, never ordered him off the car, never ordered the bubble top off, never ordered the motorcycles away. One agent told me, Vince, he's the leader of the free world. They're trying to memorize their speech to think about world events. The last thing they're thinking about is Joe Jones in the back of the car. Is he there or not there? They're not thinking that. They trust the Secret Service sometimes to their detriment. But so that was the big thing. So when people say, well, Vince, what got you into this? Why did you write books? Why did you take it any further? It's because that conversation with Gerald Bain and all his colleagues, if they would have told me something different, even if they were lying, Sean, even if they were lying, I would have said, well, I guess it's time to move on, mate. I guess that's it. Nothing else to say. But it was like, this is going against official history, because to this day, it's like a mantra from the other side. They said, President Kennedy had a rendezvous with death. Meantime, we all have a rendezvous with death. Hello, we're not immortal. But they try to it's like this like romantic thing they have. They try to put a tragic Shakespearean thing to him that he had a rendezvous with death and he was reckless in his social life and he was also reckless in his security. There's no truth to this security. It's also been greatly exaggerated about his personal life. So as you're unearthing this, then, do you see parallels with the dynamics of ancient Rome, whereby the Praetorian Guard
was, recruited to protect the
Yeah.
boss, but then became the biggest threat to the boss.
Yes. Oh, without a doubt, Sean. Very good analogy. Very good. Tip my hat to you on that one. Yeah, that's basically what it boils down to. See, that's what I always tell people, and I'm not trying to denigrate anybody else's research. There's some amazing legends, authors. This case done work before I was, even thinking about this case. And what people have got to realize is whether it was the CIA, Hoover's FBI, the mafia, some sort of combination of them or more, if the Secret Service doesn't do their normal professional job, Kennedy lives. These things are thwarted. They're negated. They're aborted. It's like, okay, we know someone's in the building. Abort. You go on an alternate route, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, to answer your question directly, now Seymour Hersh's book, Dark Side of Camelot. Some people who rightfully, castigate Mr. Hersh. They said, some of the things he wrote about should be taken with a grain of salt about Kennedy, this, that, and the other. But he interviewed, and also on camera on ABC TV, 4 former agents who protected President Kennedy, who I actually all spoke to as well. Tony Sherman, Larry Newman, Joe Palella, and Tim McIntyre, who rode on the back on the follow-up car, right 5 feet behind Kennedy's limo in Dallas. They all conveyed their anger and disgust at Kennedy's private life. Tim McIntyre saying, we have a procurer of prostitutes, meaning JFK, and they're trying to tell us, I'm paraphrasing, to break the law. And you say to yourself, what am I even doing here? Why am I in this position? And you're thinking to myself, my God, this is one of the agents who was there to protect Kennedy in Dallas 5 feet away. And he's showing visible anger and disgust circa 1997 on TV. So that's not just Seymour Hersh's book. Sometimes people go like, oh, Vince, how do we know he really said this? But they're right there on camera, all conveying the same thing. It was called Dangerous World, the Kennedy Years. It was on VHS later on. But the bottom line about this is people ask about motive, like, oh, come on, Vince, why would some of these agents maybe like look the other way and action through an action, look at their watch for a few minutes or whatever, and let the bullets fly, so to speak, hit their target? Is because I think they were angered at Kennedy's private life, although it's been exaggerated a little bit, but still, his view on foreign affairs. So you had that, Cuba and Vietnam, and his view on civil rights. I think it was a mixture of that. Some of them wanted a Texan in the White House, LBJ. And so that's the factors. And another thing too, Sean, I always tell people, sometimes people say, oh, it's been 60 plus years later. What else can we say about this case? Well, it's only been the last 5 to 15 years that a lot of films and photos have been released, digitally remastered, have been authorized to be copied and viewed. And in fact, for a while, Cecil Stoughton and Robert Knudsen, the 2 White House photographers, when they were still living, they didn't allow anything. But when he passed away, they gave it all public domain to the JFK library. What this means is you're finally able to compare and contrast prior motorcades. Because for the longest time, all we had was the Dallas assassination and the inaugural, and very little in between. So you couldn't really compare and contrast. And now I've been able to. If you go to my YouTube channel, it's all there for free. I have one video. It's 2.5 hours long. It's all known motorcade films and photos of President Kennedy. And you'll say to yourself, my God, look at how many times the agents were on or near the rear of the car. Look at how many times the bubble top was on the car. Because there's this myth that Kennedy didn't want the bubble top on. Not true at all. In fact, the bubble top was on the car between 1/3 to 1/2 of all of his motorcades. Often in very good weather, he's smiling ear to ear. The agents didn't block his view either. There was plenty of room between Kennedy and the 2 agents standing or kneeling on the back of the car. It's just a folklore that people have engraved. We can get into a little more details, but that's just basically, overview.
Have you got 2 channels? There's Vince Palamara and Vince Palamara JFK.
Yes.
One's got 22,000 subs. One's got 1.6.
Yeah, the other one's more like my music and auxiliary channel. There's some repeats there, but still, yeah.
All right. So for people in the live chat, I'm going to put Vince's channel's link.
Yeah, especially the one with 22,000 views. That's the one that's really made. It's like in the last 15 to 20 videos in particular, and they'll see the one about the motorcade routes, and they'll see our motorcade films, and they'll see what I'm talking about. So again, only the last 5 to 15 years, a lot of the stuff has come out. It took somebody like Little Old Me in the Wilderness who cared and looked for these things, because sometimes these films and photos are very brief. They'll be in an hour-long documentary, and it'll be like 15 seconds of film of him in Ireland, Germany, and Honolulu, Hawaii, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
All right. So you're a young person, you get interested in this. Over time, you start to speak to Secret Service people. My question is then, when there's a stand down, is it completely compartmentalized? whereby, if such and such a person's told not to be there or the route's changed, each section they can't discuss what's going on with each other, the Secret Service guys. So there's no way to say, hey, I've just been given this instruction. I've been given this is a bit weird. As it's so compartmentalized, they don't understand what's happening.
Well, what it boils down to is a breakdown of the Secret Service structure, the hierarchy. On the Dallas trip, you had the special agent in charge, Gerald Bain, who took his first vacation during the entire Kennedy administration from election night 1963, including November. He took his first vacation, so he was out of the mix. He had the number one guy out of the mix. You had the number two guy out of the mix, Floyd Boring, who was the planner of the Texas trip from the Secret Service point of view, but he was safely home in Maryland, controlling things. And I always make an analogy. Let's have the World Cup or the Super Bowl, depending on your interest in football. Instead of having the starting player, let's have the third stringer. Okay, mate, come on, dude, see what you can do. And that's what Roy Kellerman was. See, he was easy to usurp. There was rookie agents on the trip. There was people that didn't know. Clint Hill and Paul Lance were on the First Lady detail, so they had no way to compare and contrast. This was Paul Lance's first motorcade. Roger Warner's his first motorcade. Clint Hill was Jacqueline Kennedy detail agent. He was on some trips, but a lot of them he wasn't because it was just President Kennedy. So what happened is it was very easily compartmentalized and kind of pull the wool over certain things because you had the breakdown of the hierarchy and they just went with the flow and they just, I guess on this trip, we're not going to have this because the other major discovery I had is people always ask me what, besides agents not, being called off the limo, that's a total myth. Kennedy had nothing to do with that. The other thing I found out was building rooftops, multi-story building rooftops were normally guarded during, the FDR, Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy administration. It wasn't just because of the assassination. Well, building rooftops were not guarded in Dallas, but yet the trip before in Florida, they were. But again, unless those agents are looking up there and they're too busy looking at the crowds, they're not going to notice, hey, I don't notice any coverage on the rooftops. They're not going to think about it. They know about it. Their focus is on looking at the back of President Kennedy's head, that whole area, whatnot. And they were fed this bull story that Kennedy didn't want the agents on the back of the car. See, now this is where it gets tricky. This is where I explored my first book, Survivor's Guilt, is that on the one hand, many of these agents told me President Kennedy didn't want him on the back of the car. But Floyd Boring, who was the planner of the Texas trip, the number two agent of the Kennedy's detail, he's the one who let the agents know President Kennedy doesn't want anybody on the back of the car for this trip. Again, but yet he's on record several times with me and also in another source, the JFK library, saying that President Kennedy never interfered. He was very cooperative. He didn't order the agents off the car. So what it does, Sean, it leaves a very like a sinister burden on Floyd Boring. Wait a minute now. You're on record saying President Kennedy never ordered the agents off the car, was a nice man, never interfered. Yet Clint Hill, during his Warren Commission testimony to Arnold Inspector, said that the one person who told you and the other agents not to ride the car was none other than Floyd Boring himself. So when you have, just make a long story short for your listeners, when you have a breakdown in the hierarchy of the upper echelon of the Secret Service, people that weren't there, third stringers, new people, and you have the number two agent conveying these things to the agents, they might have thought in the back of their mind, this seems a little unusual, whatnot, but it'd been very easy to say, okay, we're not going to have this. Now, keep in mind, even though I find out, wow, a third to a half of all President Kennedy's motorcades had the bubble top, well, that leaves the motorcades that didn't have the bubble top. So not having the bubble top there isn't as suspicious as it would normally be because it wasn't like 100% of the time. Motorcycle coverage, normally a bracket of motorcycles in a wedge formation were beside the car, right beside Kennedy. In fact, on the prior Texas trips, we know the High Select Committee said it was uniquely insecure. In Fort Worth, San Antonio, Houston, he had all this coverage, motorcycles, but it was dropped down to 4, and to make matters worse, they were behind the rear wheels, so they were totally ineffective. Everybody who sees this Bruder film, they'll see during the section where Kennedy's shot, he comes out the Stemmons Freeway side, he's like this. There's no motorcycles around the car at all. So there you go. There's no military aid in the limousine. Godfrey McHugh was asked for the first time not to ride in a limousine. He was just there in the prior trip in Florida, many other trips. He said it was unusual. And they said, well, who asked you? He said, well, it was the Secret Service. They told me to accentuate full exposure not to ride there. Dr. Berkeley wasn't close by. So you had all these elements, and then you had Bill Greer, the driver of the president's car, one of my three major suspects being Bill Greer, again, driver of the limousine, Emory Roberts, who was a shift leader in charge of the follow-up car, and the aforementioned Floyd Boring, the planner of the Texas trip the number 2 agent. And what Bill Greer did was, even people like Posner and Bugliosi said he was the key to the success of the assassination. Now, they believe Oswald acted alone, but the point being is, his first shot of shots ring out, Bill Greer turns around staring at Kennedy, okay, against training, common sense, and whatnot. Roy Kellerman, the agent next to him, third stringer or not, tells him, get out of line, we've been hit. Roy Kellerman grabs the microphone and is about to say, we've been hit, get to the hospital and alert the follow-up car agents. That's when Bill Greer turns around a second time, disobeys common sense, training, and staring at Kennedy until the fatal shot makes its mark. Only then does he face forward, hit the gas. In 1991, when I was only 25, my first presentation ever in Fredonia in front of Harry Livingstone, George Michael Ivica, Robert Cutler, and whatnot, I pointed this out, and they were like, my God, Vince, I thought he only turned around once. All those years, people were studying the Zapruder film, and they weren't looking at Kellerman Greer. They had no interest in the Secret Service. I guess why the Secret Service is secret, as Robert Groden used to say. They weren't paying attention to these agents. I'm looking at Kennedy. I'm looking at Connally. I want to study the Secret Service, the single bullet theory, darn it. So what this means, Sean, for you and your listeners is, okay, you have a breakdown of, and that's 6 to 8 seconds or longer, of him not looking back, not once but twice, disobeying an order in training. And then when he gets, before the Warren Commission, he denies it all. He says he never saw Kennedy even one time. He saw the governor, and then he turned around and hit the gas. He makes it sound like he just saw the governor and hit the gas. Well, Bill Greer died in 1985. I spoke to his son Richard in 1990 and 1991, and I asked him, what did your father think of President Kennedy? And the line went dead. It would be like, Sean, if you asked me a question, I just sat here like this, like, Vince, are you okay? Is everything all right? So I went on to other questions, and I came back to it. He goes, well, we're Methodists, and JFK was Catholic. Bizarre thing to say at the time, but as the years went by, I found out Bill Greer was born and raised in County Tyrone, Ireland, only come to this country between the ages of 18 and 19, depending on who you want to listen to. But the bottom line, County Tyrone, Ireland. And we know, not to paint stereotypes, but there's been Methodists and Catholics and Protestants. We've had this whole, bloody wars and religious persecution, whatnot. It turns out the Irish Times contacted me in 2013, says, Vince, we have some information about Bill Greer you'll find fascinating. He was part of the Order of the Orange. So he wore on his sleeve his anti-Catholic feelings. And again, people got to realize, total stranger on the phone. Why didn't he lie and say, oh, he loved President Kennedy and President Kennedy loved him? He ignored the answer, the question. And when he came back, he says, well, we're Methodists and JFK was Catholic. And it rings huge when you look at his actions as a Zapruder film. Again, looking back not once but twice, disobeying a direct order. In fact, Roy Kellerman, before William Manchester, author William Manchester, is buried in a footnote in Death of the President. He goes, Greer then looked in the back of the car. Maybe he didn't believe me. And the Warren Commission didn't do any cross-examination on him. They took it at face value that he only looked back once and only saw Connally. He never saw sight of Kennedy at all, which is a bold-faced lie. Anybody who goes to the Zapruder film on YouTube would say, wait, he's looking at him twice. He's looking at the fatal shot, makes his mark, then he turns around. So that's what it is. It's all action through an action. Just take a few seconds. People look at the March 30th, 1981 Reagan assassination video, and they'll see, okay, they only had 68 seconds. Agile minds and fleetness of foot is all they had, but they did a brilliant job. I spoke to Jerry Parr, who was the head of Reagan's detail, pushing him in the limousine, doing what they did. But you need to contrast that video. I did it in the Coon Camelot, the documentary, with the Zapruder film, and the lack of security, the lack of awareness. In fact, everybody makes Clint Hill out to be a hero, but he was one of the agents who drank the night before, one of the 9 agents. He got to the car after everything was over, and he was a Jacqueline Kennedy agent. So he got to her aid, but did nothing for Kennedy. So that's the thing. There's been mythology. Oh, bless him. But you know what? In World War II, we didn't give medals to almost doing something. Either you did it or you didn't. He didn't do it, and he should have actually been thrown out of the Secret Service. Again, it's in the Secret Service manual, Sean. In Volume 18, there's a little excerpt from the manual. It says, the drinking while travel status is grounds for removal from the service. And yet him and 3 other agents on the fob car drank the night before. And it's like a limited hangout. They admitted they had 3 beers, a scotch and water. How much did they really have? Well, 2 media people I spoke to, and it's in my first book, said, oh, they were bombed. Oh, they were drinking a lot. They were carousing a lot. They were hot. In fact, Paul Landis even admitted that he didn't get back to the Fort Hotel Texas until 5:30 in the morning. They had to report to duty at 8 a.m. So he had sleep deprivation and alcohol consumption. In fact, that's why I was saying that's why these agents wore sunglasses so they couldn't see their eyes. So, yeah.
Right. So on this channel, we don't like to cut long stories short. And the most common question that's coming in for you, Vince, is just to take us slowly through what you think happened. And I'll take my jacket off and settle in.
Okay, sounds good. What I think happened is, well, in a general way, I'll just say that I definitely believe there was a conspiracy, multiple shooters. There was definitely a shooter from the front. I'll tie this into the Secret Service. Okay, so you had a shooter from the rear. As people have seen from my fifth book, Honest Answers, I believe Oswald's rifle was involved. Oswald's rifle was guilty as sin as one of the shooters. You might say to yourself, Vince, how could you? This is heresy. You believe Oswald did it? No. I'm saying Oswald's rifle, but Oswald didn't fire it. In fact, it's come out pretty much, and I explore some of my book Honest Answers, that the gun could not be fired accurately when it was taken apart. You know, the story that supposedly Oswald put together, either a dime or a screwdriver they never found and put together. Let's even say that's true. It couldn't be sighted in properly. So it was a prop. So that leaves the other alternative, that it was actually taken into the book depository in whole, like a whole form, like it wasn't broken down. That means Oswald definitely couldn't have brought it in at that time, because we know Buell Wesley Frazier and the story about the paper bag and this, that, and the other, and his sister as well. So what I think happened is someone was using Oswald's rifle. Why else? To frame him. Of course they want the ballistics and the rifle and the rifle shooting from the window. Duh. So when people go, isn't that a bummer, Vince, that it's Oswald's rifle? No. In fact, if anything, it'd be bizarre if it wasn't. So that's what he did to tie it on him. There's a shooter from the front. So you got a conspiracy. I believe it was rogue elements of the CIA were involved. Very small, handful of a handful. Okay. So it's not like, oh, there's legions of people and the CIA and the Secret Service were involved. No. As agencies, they were not. We're talking about just a few bad apples, so to speak, spoiling the bunch. And as far as Kennedy, you got to keep in mind, on prior stops. See, people have a tendency to think it was caused of the assassination and all the security happened, you know, so they want to make sure it's never happened again. Meantime, LBJ rode in open cars many times in 1964. When the limousine was being renovated, he had to use the follow-up car, the open follow-up car, as his limousine, this, that, and the other. But anyway, not to digress. On the prior, let's look at Florida. We'll just look at the prior stop in Florida 4 days before. Agents rode in the back of the car during the entire 28-mile motorcade. You had that. Okay. You had Godfrey and Q, military aid in a limousine. You had many flanking motorcycles in a wedge formation. They were going very fast. You had Floyd Boring, the number 2 agent. Boehner Boring always accompanied Kennedy when he left the White House, and including these motorcades. They had tremendous protection also on rooftops, building rooftops, multi-story building rooftops. Everyone was guarded. I spoke to Russell Groover, who was the head of the Tampa police force, and he was one of the lead motorcycle officers. He says every multi-story building was guarded. And then I said to myself, again, thinking of a defense attorney, multi-story. What about single dwellings? So those were guarded eye to eye because they were just a one-story dwelling by military police or regular police or agents from the field offices. So that's how they did that. And it turns out, this came out in the late 1990s, thanks to the ARB, the Tampa Secret Service final survey report, there in black and white. Building rooftops will be secured by the Sheriff's Department for the trip. 28 miles motorcade, Dallas was only between 10 and 11. So they couldn't afford that security in Dallas. So as Trippy was warned about by Senator Fulbright, Pierre Salinger, others, please don't go to Dallas. Please avoid Dallas, Mr. President. And yet Tampa was almost 3 times longer. He had all the security. Okay. And then you just contrast that. And they had 6 pages of threats they found to Kennedy in Tampa and Miami. Enrique Laca, all these other people that are connected to New Orleans, actually named in these documents. Yet when he gets to Dallas, the story is, oh, we didn't find anybody in the PRS files. Roy Kellerman admitted to his credit to the Warren Commission this was unusual. I spoke to Abraham Bolden. He said it was very unusual. Made the analogy. It would be like President Obama visiting Mississippi in the heart of the South. Oh, so no threats here. Good luck in your motorcade. Come on. We weren't born yesterday. In Dallas at the right-wing John Birch Society, the wanted for treason posters, and they're trying to tell us there were no threats found in Secret Service files. And then again, even if you believe the official story about Oswald, okay, Oswald was an ex-Marine who defected to the Soviet Union, was around Fair Play for Cuba committee. He wasn't on anybody's radar for the FBI and the Secret Service. We had James Hosty on the route in a diner as the limousine's passing. We have all that. And we also have the first time in history, political history, whatnot, that a so-called assassin adamantly denies it. They normally come and say, yes, I did it. I killed it. Like Leon Czolgosz against President McKinley in 1901. I did it for the working people, for the working class. They usually come out and admit their deeds because they want the political ramifications. Because if it's just like shooting a man, it's no big deal, but they want their cause. And here was Oswald adamantly denying doing it. And then you juxtapose that with the medical people from Parkland, Bethesda saying the right rear of his head was gone, the throat wound was an entrance wound. People at Bethesda end of the line basically saying the same thing, and documents only came out in the 1990s thanks to the ARB, because for years we believed the Haslett committee that there was a difference. There wasn't. And you look at the Zapruder film, even a schoolboy would look and say, like my wife had really no interest in this case at all. She's younger than me. And we looked at the Zapruder film and said, what's your impression? He goes, about any coaching or anything, she goes, looks like he was shot from the front, like an invisible baseball bat hit him. It's like, there you go. But again, that only came out in 1975. So to answer your question about compartmentalization, that's what a lot of it was. The Zapruder film didn't come out 12 years later. A lot of these documents didn't come out to the 1990s and onward. People didn't think to look at the Secret Service. People have their own lives to lead, and a lot of this gets bogged down in minutia. There's so many books, and there's been a lot of bad books too, theory-driven. And, I tell you, the best, I was talking about the last 5 to 15 years, Sean. The last 5 to 15 or 20 years has been the best books ever written on the case, because they've had the advantage of correcting the errors of the past and having a lot of documents that have come out. They've been able to say, wow, there's a corroboration, such and such was here or wasn't here, and be able to clean things up. Because for the longest time, if you look at the third decade, the fourth decade, the print journals for the internet kicked in, you'll see a lot of good-natured, well-meaning people, but they'll make mistakes. They'll be like, I believed Oswald did. There was a famous one about Oswald that somebody saw a wedding ring in the photo of Oswald in captivity and said, what about the ring? It's like, oh no, that was a Dallas police officer who just got his hand in the photo. But back in 1990, 1991, it was compelling stuff because we had nothing else to go on. What I'm trying to say is you have John Newman and other people going to the National Archives now. You have millions of documents that have been released. You have people doing just God's work with these books and whatnot, authors. And the case has just gone so much further than it did forensically and other things back in the past. And that's what leads back to me with the Secret Service is that, you just had a situation where people just look at Robert Groden. That's a famous thing he said in 1992 to me, because I guess that's why the Secret Service is secret. I never really looked at them, to be honest with you. And this is Robert Groden, one of the legends of the case. And this is not to cast any aspersions. He's a fantastic guy and everything. It just a matter of everybody's lens. Some people are just fascinated with Hoover and the CIA and the mafia, and they just don't really care about the Secret Service or other areas of the case. So it takes someone to have an interest. That was me contacting these gentlemen. In fact, Sean, thank God I spoke to Gerald Bain and a lot of his colleagues, because like Gerald Bain's case, he died 6 months later of cancer. So if I never would have contacted you, realize what people would do. They'd say, Vince, your work's wonderful, but did you ever speak to the number one agent? What would his take on it? See? So then I talked to the number one guy, the number two guy, one of the shift leaders, Art Godfrey, who was on the Texas trips, and told me that's a bunch of baloney. Kennedy never ordered agents off the car. In fact, Sam Kinney, the driver of the follow-up car, he's the sole responsible person for the bubble top not being on the car in Dallas. It was originally on, then they took it off. He said it's one of his, back in the early 90s, it was my 30-year regrets whether I made the right decision or not. But if you read books, you say, oh, Kennedy didn't want that bubble top on. No truth to that at all. And what I say that for so boldly is you go to my YouTube channel, the one video that's there for free, and you'll see, my God, look how many times he had the bubble top on. He looks like he's smiling, ear to ear grin. There's one little girl goes up to the bubble top and he waves to her. And then, the thing about the bubble top is, yes, it wasn't bulletproof from a standard way of looking at things, but it was bullet resistant in the respect that anything would have helped. The several agents I spoke to said it was a deterrent, and the biggest reason was a deterrent. It was a psychological deterrent, because 99% of the public thought it was bulletproof. So would a respective assassin even fire if he saw the bubble top on the car? He'd say, oh, it is the bubble top on, because everybody thought it was bulletproof. Many times Kennedy had the best of both worlds too, Sean. He would have the bubble top in partial form. He would have the front and rear pieces on and leave the middle piece open so you can get some air and every once in a while stand up. Now, people got to realize every once in a while, they say, Vince, this still photo, Kennedy's like a sitting duck. He's standing up in the motorcade. The thing is, the car was going between 25, 35 or more miles an hour. Building rooftops were normally guarded. Hello, you had agents on the back of the car. So what might have not been 2025 era security, vintage security, but it was damn good for the time. And that's why, again, President FDR, Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy had lived all those time until November 22nd. In fact, this discovery, Sean, was only less than 5 years ago during the COVID lockdown. There's a gentleman who had a wonderful YouTube channel. His channel went under probably because copyright concerns. He had so much from the networks. Well, he had a beautiful video that I have it on my channel now several times. I've saved it too. ABC's Ron Gardner telling the world, the multi-millions of people watching, saying that normally building rooftops were guarded. I can't understand how something like this could have happened. In fact, this has happened for many presidents before, where the building rooftops are guarded to prevent just such an occurrence. And that's before they announced President Kennedy dead. That he's telling the world that he has this antiquated audio piece up to his ear and telling everybody this. Well, I'd never seen it before. I said, my God. And I ripped it. I took it off his channel and everything. Thank God I did. His whole channel went under. So there would be no clip of that telling the world. But again, then it goes back to what my mom and dad said. 10 people could have shot Kennedy, Vince. We were so grief-stricken. All your details went in one ear, not the other. They just said, Kennedy was killed. They didn't care where Oswald. In fact, they didn't know if Oswald was in the front or the back. They didn't know if other people were involved. They just was like, oh. And again, it just harkens back to what I said earlier when we first started talking about the case. All bets were off when Ruby stepped in. That's when the credibility just skyrocketed downward. They couldn't believe it. Oh, come on. We're supposed to believe that one man did this. He's denying it all. And then Jack Ruby, he looks like a mafia don just in the video. He steps forward and plugs Oswald, and that's it. And we know about with Ruby, what he said, it's on my YouTube channel as well. People have seen this before. It says, the world will never know the true facts, my motivations. And the reporter says, are these people in high places, Jack? And he says, yes. So,
all right, let me just try and take some of the essential components out of this then.
Yeah.
So Kennedy's in his vehicle, roof is down. Oswald's in the building, the Book Depository building. Right?
But it's rifle, not him. His rifle's being used while he's down in this, in the lunchroom. Yes.
So he's downstairs and someone's got his rifle upstairs.
Right.
All right. So Kennedy's driving through. And are you saying that which direction do you think the first shot came from?
I think the first shot did indeed come from the rear. I wouldn't rule out the records building next to the Book Depository, like in that area, the Daltex building or the records building. Could it even come from Oswald's weapon? Again, you're setting someone up. You're going to use his weapon, darn it. You want that to happen. It'd be like if someone stole your car and robbed the bank. Like, Sean, we have your vehicle. We have the license plate. You're like, oh, I wasn't there. But they'd see your vehicle. Same thing with the rifle. So that's it. The first shot of shots rings out, and that's when Greer turns around, staring at Kennedy, slows the limousine down, and disobeys. Okay, shot from the rear. And we know for a fact Connolly was definitely shot from the rear. None of the silliness that he was never shot from the rear. He was definitely shot from the rear. He was definitely shot from the front. Not only we have the medical people that said that the throat wound was an entrance wound, but he's flying backwards in the left. The back of his head's gone. The vast majority of people, my second book of the medical evidence, I talk about that. Okay, so you had this, crossfire. You had the people totally surprised. They're there waving. Their kids are like all smiling. Here's Kennedy, Jack, like Hollywood royalty. This happens in just a few seconds, and it's over. And to be fair, now most of those people ran towards the grassy knoll and whatnot, but a lot of them were just in shock. They didn't know what to think or feel until things were done. And people have a tendency to always put this on Vietnam. The motive for this case was Vietnam. I think the motive of the case was Cuba. That's all the connections to Oswald. Vietnam was more like a backwater, back page story in 1963. And I want to believe that Kennedy never would have had a land war in Vietnam, but there's a part of me that says I can't see him totally getting out of it either. So I think it was Cuba was the whole motivation. They wanted to bomb it back to the Stone Age. They wanted to get rid of Castro once and for all because Bay of Pigs didn't do it. The Cuban Missile Crisis didn't do it. Kennedy shut down the camps. That was going to be the end of Cuba. Their dreams of getting back. We only know the mafia wanted Cuba back too. So it was just a matter of all that. And now, as far as the Secret Service goes, when you don't have the motorcycles, bracket, and limousine in good number, you only have 4, but they're behind the real rear wheels. They're out of harm's way. You have no military aid in the limousine, out of harm's way. You have a third stringer. Again, imagine going to the Super Bowl or the World Cup, you know, if your starting player, the number one star of your team, you have a third string off the bench. That's what he was, okay? Then you don't have building rooftops guarded as they normally were. Just compare and contrast. I have it in my last two books where all the trips for Kennedy's, the motorcade, the rooftops were guarded. But just the prior one in Florida, they were guarded very well. They weren't guarded at all. Okay, just even if they weren't guarding anywhere else but Dealey Plaza, common sense tells. In fact, Agent Joe Petro even said in his book that it's common sense. If you look at Dealey Plaza, that's a perfect place to assassinate a president. Triangle of fire, he's slowing down. And one thing I'll get to before I forget, I told you before about Gerald Bain told me something else tantalized. I said I'd get to it later about the motorcade route. Well, he told me he was interviewed with the House Select Committee, which I already knew, but he says they also interviewed him under executive session. Sean, to this day, his executive session testimony has not come forward. And also Maurice Martineau, the head of the Chicago office, also spoke to them in executive session. His materials have never come forward. But I said, boy, what did they ask you, sir? He says, they asked me about the trip before in Florida, and he asked me why the motorcade route was changed for Dallas. Again, it almost dropped my phone moment. I said, was the motorcade changed for Dallas? He says, I know it was changed, but why? I've forgotten completely. I don't know. So always got to focus on it. He could have been lying. Oh, Vince, he remembered. He just didn't want to tell you over the phone what the details were. He's admitting that the motorcade route was changed for Dallas. He's admitting the House Select Committee is asking him this. And again, all these years later, Assassination Records Review Board, and yes, I did tell Jefferson Morley and other people to look for these things. Maurice Martineau, executive session testimony, never released. Gerald Bain's executive session testimony, never released. And this is a big thing because some people on the other side said, oh, that's a myth. His motorcade route wasn't changed, darn it. Well, it also turned out research I did for my first book, I have a whole chapter in the motorcade route, that they were going to go Main to Industrial. In fact, when FDR visited Dallas in 1936, he went straight down Main Street. That was the normal thoroughfare, what you would do, you know, when you visited Dallas. In fact, ironically, when Senator Lyndon Johnson and Senator John Kennedy visited Dallas on September 11th, but 1960, they drove through Dealey Plaza, Main Street, never went through that dog leg. They went straight the other way. Okay, Forrest Sorrell, the head of the Dallas office, was part of security in both instances, FDR and in 1960. And yet, just to visit a few more people, they did that awkward dog leg turn to make these turns to go past the Book Depository, slow the vehicle down, open up to a field of fire. If they would have been going straight down Main Street, again, which is the normal thoroughfare, the normal parade route, as Governor Connolly even admitted under oath, they would have been going further away from the Book Depository, further away from the grassy knoll, and at a faster rate of speed. In fact, Jerry Bruno, Democratic National Committee advance man, even posited that to William Manchester. I think he also did the House Select Committee. It might even be in his book, The Advance Men, that his great thing he always thought in his mind, boy, if only Kennedy was going down Main Street, maybe his assassination never would have occurred. There's one official source that tries to poo-poo and tries to debunk this, and it's Sheriff Bill Lumpkin. Right off the top of my head, it's Bill Lumpkin, I think his name is. He was he's an assistant police chief. I think it was Lumpkin. That's it. Yeah, just right now I'm trying to think of the name. And again, I explore it in my chapter 4 of my book. And he says, oh, there was winos and broken pavement on Main to Industrial. That's why Kennedy didn't go there, and the House Select Committee seemed to buy it. Thing I'll say about that is President Kennedy visited the slums of Caracas, Venezuela. President Kennedy visited the slums of Harlem, New York. Wherever the president goes, so go the people, so go the security. I've been to Industrial Boulevard. Yeah, it's not fancy and ritzy, but certainly no embarrassment to a president to go down. I've been to Dealey Plaza several times. They could have definitely gone straight down Main Street. And again, Gerald Bain telling me, the House Select Committee asked him why the motorcade route was changed. He goes, I know it was changed, why? Amazing bombshell stuff. But again, these have never been released. His staff interview has been released. Okay, just like Maurice Martineau's staff interview, where somebody interviewed him, took notes, that was released in 1996. But his executive session testimony is not. And I told Jefferson Morley, I said, I wonder who else was interviewed in executive session in their materials. Did they bypass the law of putting these records away for 75 years, and the ARB just totally missed it, fumbled the ball, or didn't know about this. Because I wonder if there's a treasure trove of executive session testimony of other principal people from the CIA, FBI, whatnot, witnesses to the case. Really makes you think, Sean. So
everyone's loving the level of detail you're giving here, Vince, and we really appreciate that. So let me just go back to the chronology briefly then.
Sure.
So you said there's a crossfire occurs now. You've got a guy with Oswald's gun up in the tower. You've got shots coming from front and behind. How many shooters total do you calculate? And are they all front and behind, or is there a triangulation going on as well?
Yeah, I believe there was 2 from behind, one using Oswald's rifle from the Book Depository, and just 1 from the front. I don't buy into this army of shooters. Some people get carried away. Oh, there was 12 people shooting. There was 20 people shooting. No, come on. Let's get real. Now, the thing is, if anybody's heard a 21-gun salute, 21 rifles are firing, sounds like 1. Their precision's amazing. So we're only talking 3 shooters, not 21-gun salute. We're just talking 3. So, again, they're shooting from the rear. And I believe either the Daltex building or the records building next to the Book Depository. One with Oswald's rifle, 1 from the front. Now I have wavered on exactly where from the front. Sometimes I believe that traditional grassy knoll, where the acoustics evidence, that juncture of the fence where the big tree's at, and there's a 6 Seconds of Dallas, Josiah Thompson. It's you see what looks like a fedora hat, and you can see right over the fence that mark. But there's another part of me, because I've visited Dealey Plaza several times, the juncture of the overpass and the fence. There's a little bit of a diagonal area that's away from anybody who's on the overpass to see, and there's a grating there. It's not a manhole cover, it's a grating, and you just take the grate off, and someone could have been firing there just a little bit of a either under the fence or maybe a little bit of section through the fence, and that would have been a perfect place to have shot Kennedy from there too. I have not ruled out the South knoll either, but I don't believe that was part of the headshot or whatnot. And again, the way Dealey Plaza was structured, the lack of security, if it was an inside job, all you had is a few people that hated Kennedy from the Dallas Police Department, a few people didn't like Kennedy from the Secret Service to do what they did, and the vast majority of other agents and other officers are following orders, even if the orders are perplexing. Like, I don't like, some of the agents even admitted to Gerald Blaine in his book, The Kennedy Detail. Yeah, they have similar names, Bain and Blaine. Said that I don't remember Kennedy ever saying anything about not having agents on the back of the car either. Why is he for the first time all of a sudden? You know, my comment is, yeah, why indeed? And not to get on, I'll make this very brief, not to be in a big digression, but it's actually very important, is that, as most people know, Clint Hill and Gerald Blaine, BLAINE, came out with books, Kennedy Detail, Mrs. Kennedy, Me, etc. They came out with those books from 2010 on. Well, those books, at least the initial ones, were in reaction to yours truly. This is not delusions of grandeur or events. You're just taking credit for something. How do we know it's you? I'm 100% sure. I had attorney letters sent to me. I spoke to Blaine and Hill before the books were even a thought. And they saw, because again, my first book wasn't even out yet. Okay, I was just an amateur author. In fact, it was self-published, my first book, before it came out, Trying Day. Okay, and they saw my internet writings, and I think it freaked them out. What happened was Gerald Blaine told me, like he told all the other colleagues, echoed the same thing. Gerald Blaine told me that President Kennedy never interfered with their actions at all, and yet he's seen my work. He even admitted in 2005 interview when he began his book that when I saw some of the writings on the internet, I knew I had to do something to counter this. And when he comes on C-SPAN on television with the head of CEO, Brian Lamb, him and Clint Hill, they spend 10 minutes talking about yours truly. I have it on my page. And then the second time Clint Hill's on C-SPAN, he brings up me out of nowhere again. It's a totally out of context. They're talking about Jacqueline Kennedy, all these wonderful stories about John, and Caroline. Out of nowhere, the CEO of C-SPAN goes, this gentleman, Vince Palamara, do you remember talking about him last time? He says, yes. Well, he came out with a review of your book, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is I was little amateur me in an apartment eking out a living at the time in 2010, 2012. I didn't even have a book out yet. Why were they going after me and showing YouTube videos? The answer is why indeed. They came out with their books. And if anybody reads Gerald Blaine's book, The Kennedy Detail, it's blame the victim writ large. It's like a neon sign. Kennedy did it. Kennedy killed himself. Basically, you might say, what? Kennedy killed himself. Vince, what are you talking about? He believes Oswald had it alone, but he said that Kennedy ordered him off the car. He didn't want that bubble top. Oh, he did this. If this never would have happened, if Oswald never would have succeeded if Kennedy didn't order him off the car. And he did all that because he saw my writings. He said, my God, because I sent a 22-page letter to Clint Hill in 2005, which was a thumbnail sketch of all my work. When I spoke to Clint Hill after I sent him a letter bold enough to do that, he was angry as heck at me. He goes, I don't have any interest in talking to you and all of that. And then all of a sudden, I read the trade papers, and there's Gerald Blaine with a foreword by Clint Hill. And they're writing a book called The Kennedy Detail. And right on the flap jacket, it says, Kennedy often banned them from the car. It's like, oh, here we go. And then I get an attorney letter from Gerald Blaine saying to cease and desist about blogging about him any longer. I didn't, because I talked to my attorney. He says, it's free speech. As long as you're not calling him something really horrible, you're allowed to. It's free speech. Keep doing what you're doing. You're all right. I'll protect you. Well, a friend of Gerald Blaine's contacted me at work right before my first book, Survivor's Guilt, was coming out. I got a scary call from the head of human resources. Vince, can I speak to you? Yeah. Is there a private room, just you and I? I thought, I'm getting fired. What did I do? I didn't do anything wrong, did I? So, and I can't, for legal reasons, say the gentleman's name. He was a good friend of Gerald Blaine. That such and such contacted the CEO, and once you terminated for your anti-patriotic writings about his friend Gerald Blaine, this guy was in military intelligence. I won't say his name. Well, he called not once or twice. No, your listeners are probably wondering, what happened? What happened, Vince? Well, no consequence, thank God, came to me. They laughed. Says, Vince, all letters are censored. They never go screened, I should say. They never go to the CEO. They read them first, and if it's deemed appropriate, they'll send it on to them. So the CEO never said it, never saw it. Vince, you're okay. Your employment's fine with us. You didn't do anything wrong. Says, I don't know why he's doing it, but if he writes again, he'll be in trouble. He wrote again. A month later, he wrote another letter trying to get me terminated from my job. So if people think there's nothing to this, Oswald, let alone get a life, why is Gerald Blaine of the Kennedy Detail sending angry attorney letters to me? Why are they talking to me about on C-SPAN, little old me on C-SPAN before a book came out? And why is he having his military intelligence connected friend trying to get me fired from my job if there's nothing to this? Why indeed? That's what I'll say. Because they realize, so Sean, what they realize is Oswald or no Oswald, conspiracy or no conspiracy, they're the men who killed Kennedy. Because again, it should have been prevented. It's not like Vance, oh, come on, damn you. Greer does his normal. I always tell people, if a loved one's in the back of the car, okay, and shots ring out, and they're like this, and are you gonna sit there and go, are you okay? Is everything like this? No, you're gonna hit the gas, you're gonna swerve, you're gonna do something. Instead, he didn't do what he did. And all the other things that were taken away from Kennedy. And again, all this happened on the day Kennedy shot. It's not like, oh, this happened in Louisville, Kentucky, Vince, and nothing untoward happened to Kennedy when all the security breakdown. It's happened in the midst of all these things. He's warned not to go to Dallas. Then you have all these security taken away from him. Then you have here's another thing, too, is about 8 agents I spoke to believe there was a conspiracy. They're not all Oswald Attal alone people. Oh, no. Maurice Martineau, the head of the Chicago office, former White House detail agent who was Abraham Bolden's boss in Chicago, who couldn't stand Bolden. But what he did tell me is he believed there was a conspiracy. He says, when I got some of the details and knew what was going on, I said, so I was fascinated. I said, sir, can you share them? He says, no, I can't share the detail. I'll just tell you that I definitely believe it's a conspiracy, and we'll just let it go at that. I don't want to be quoted on any details and whatnot. He didn't mind me interviewing him, but when it got into details, kibosh on that. Sam Kinney, the driver of the follow-up car, adamantly believed there was a conspiracy. In fact, told me that the right rear of Kennedy's head went on. When he was on the C-130 transport plane, he found the rear piece of Kennedy's skull in the C-130 in the limousine, put in a foam patch to Dr. Berkeley and Thomas Mills. And they picked up the piece. He goes, well, whatever happened, I don't know. So it was clean as a pin. It looked like a big flower pot piece. It was just laying there. And I said, well, the beautiful brain is in case he told me he was a big fan of President Kennedy. But then next to Sam Kinney on the running board was Tim McIntyre, who called Kennedy a procurer of prostitutes and was angry at Kennedy. So that's what I mean. You have the mixture. You have good agents, bad agents, very few bad agents, and the other ones just following orders. Everything's just, it is what it is. You have a gaggle of agents, you got one bad apple. Here's the thing. This will really, I'm not a big proponent of LBJ did it, although I can respect people that do. This is grist for the mill for people who believe LBJ did it. One of my 3 suspects is Emory Roberts, who was the commander of the follow-up car agents. The shooting happens. He orders the agents not to move. This is before Kennedy's killed. The first shot string guy, in fact, it's on the coup in Camelot. I show the audio, play the audio from Sam Kinney. He was sitting right next to him. Emory Roberts died in 1973, and Sam Kinney was still alive up to 1997. I spoke to him in the early 90s. I said, is this true? You're telling me? He goes, oh, yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, he ordered the agents not to move. But then I think he caught him, like realized, wait a minute, why would he do something like that? So he read, well, I think he just didn't want Jack Reedy and Clint Hill to get run over by the car. Say, wait. You don't think about the agent. Like another agent I spoke to who guarded Obama, Bush. He said that's ridiculous. You don't care one iota about your own personal safety. You would never tell the other agents to cease and desist or restrict their flow of security. Why would you do that? What happened to Emory Roberts at the assassination? Oh, nothing much, Sean. He just became the appointment secretary to LBJ. Yeah, in 1965. Now, he was still an agent up to when he died in 1973. He replaced Dave Powers at that same desk near the Oval Office. And the reporters were wondering, what's this active agent introduced to the Prime Minister of Japan? What's he doing? And I got the articles in my books, the last couple of books. The press was just, what is this Emory Roberts doing, doing appointment secretary duties? And again, there's no doubt about it. He did what he did. He's the only agent I could ever find who was an active agent, even a retired agent, and doing duties for the president. You're supposed to be apolitical. You're not supposed to be Democrat or Republican, pro or anti-president. You're there to do a job, whether you like them or you hate them, whatnot. And it's just crazy. And when LBJ left the office, he did the final farewell of the Secret Service. And guess what he said? He called Emory Roberts by name. He says, Emory Roberts couldn't be here today. He greets me every morning and says goodbye to me every night. And this is the agent who ordered the agents not to move when the shooting began. When they got to Parkland Hospital, guess what he did? To Roy Kellerman, his superior, he said, you stick to Kennedy. We're sticking to Johnson. And they all ran into Parkland Hospital shielding LBJ when Roy Kellerman's getting the lifeless body of Kennedy out of the back seat. And Roy Kellerman's his boss. So again, that's all it takes is a few people. It took Bill Greer, Emory Roberts, shift leader, and Floyd Boring, who was the planner of the Texas trip for the Secret Service, who was safely in Washington at the time, allegedly washing windows. Was all, but he is in communication. Winston Lawson, the lead advance agent, he admitted this to the House Select Committee, and you see the back and forth documents before this. In fact, Floyd Boring, again, this only came out in the 90s onward. His oral history to the JFK Library and the Truman Library came out, and Floyd Boring admitted he was on all the advance work for President Kennedy, all his trips. Anytime there was a trip, whether he was there or not, he was part of the security. He was part of the advance work. So it's like, oh, so when people say, oh, it was Winston Lawson who altered that route, could it have been Winston Lawson, or could have been Floyd Boring back in Dallas, who's pushing things and saying, because we know Clint Hill admitted that Floyd Boring was the man who told him and other colleagues not to ride in the back of the car for Dallas. But here's the interesting thing, Sean. In 2010, Clint Hill with Gerald Blaine by his side did an oral history at the 640 Museum. I was flabbergasted. I got a copy of it, and it's very boring, to be honest. Yet nothing to just one tantalizing, jaw-dropping moment. He says, well, when it comes to anything the president says to you, you can listen to it, but you don't follow it. You do what you feel is right. So what we used to do is listen to President Kennedy. We did what we felt was best anyway. So there he is on video admitting him and his book was all full of crap about Kennedy or on the card. He said even if Kennedy would have said something, they would have disobeyed it and did what they thought was best anyway. It's on my YouTube channel. I have a bootleg of it where I got it looped over and over again with even the transcripts. And we go, and I've had some people say, I can't believe Clint Hill said this, because this destroys the whole genesis of his book and Gerald Blaine's book, where the onus. That's the big thing I always hear from people that believe Oswald act alone. Oh, come on, Kennedy didn't want those agents on a car. So when you find out that's bull and it was a Secret Service myth, then you say to yourself, what else are they lying about? What other security was breached? Again, it was only the year 2020 during COVID. I got that video of Ron Gardner telling the entire world, normally multi-story building rooftops are guarded, and we can't see any in these pictures that any agents or officers on the building rooftops. So there you go. So there's even more details if you want. I can tell you even more stuff about what went wrong.
This is great. All right, so we've got almost 1,000 people watching live right now across all platforms. I'm here with Vince Palamara, author. His YouTube channel link is in the description box. Amazon link is down there. Several people, Vince, have put in the chat that you're one of the best JFK guests we've had on the channel. So viewers, put a 1 in the chat if you agree with that. If you think Vince is one of the best JFK guests we've had on the channel, put a 2 if you can't stand Vince, I think it's going to be all ones, my friend.
I vote that way.
I'll put a 1 in from me as well.
Some people talk to me. They say, "Vince, you talk too damn fast." I'm sorry if I do that. Sometimes I talk fast.
No, it's great. We love the energy. It's great. You cover more ground doing that. So, going back to the chronology again. So we got to the point where we discussed. You believe there was a crossfire. So President gets whacked. We've got tonight. We've got coming on Buell Wesley Frazier from the Texas School Book Depository building, who was
Oswald's
Oswald's
work. 2019. Yeah, nice guy.
That's in 5 hours views. What do you think, Vince, happened from when Kennedy was assassinated? Can you tell us what happened? You think happened in the Book Depository building? Yeah,
sure. In the Book Depository building, I think Oswald's down there in the lunchroom, like he said he was. He was getting a Coke. He's down below. Now, what transpired up above was his rifle, and I think the rifle was already put together. It was never taken down because, again, Flip de May, he came up 2 tremendous books. One was called the Lee Harvey Oswald Files, and he did a tremendous service in the one part of his book showing, and I think it was with the late Ian Griggs involved in the footnotes, that there's no way that rifle could have been taken apart, put together, and used. It wouldn't have been accurate. It wouldn't have been sighted in yet. He couldn't have fired it accurately in any way. So what that means is the rifle had to have been put together beforehand. Someone else slipped the rifle in. Do I think Oswald was lily white and totally innocent? No. Big no. Why wasn't he watching the motorcade? He was so politically active. I think he was waiting for a contact. He was waiting for something to happen. He was waiting for a phone call that never came, to quote the JFK movie. So I don't think poor innocent Oswald, he had nothing to do with anything. No, I just don't think he was a shooter. And I think that they try to stick it all on him. And that's what he said. He's a patsy. I don't know what this is about. And you can tell in I have it on my YouTube channel of all his denials, everything, all the time he was paraded around. And so he needed someone to blame, and they shoved the blame on him. That's why when people go like, "Oh, Vince, what's your take on the ballistic shows that came from Oswald's rifle?" For those people that believe Oswald had alone, says, "Well, of course, you got to have somebody to set up." In fact, if it didn't, then I'd say to myself, well, then who are they going to blame? And then Oswald's connected to Russia and Cuba. They want to bomb Cuba back to the Stone Age. You had all that. Not to get off your point, to be specific to the Book Depository, I think he's a little befuddled. He leaves the Book Depository. Then he realizes, oh my God, this is going to be all on me. No one else is involved. This is going to be put on me. I wasn't even upstairs, whether someone used my rifle or whatnot. Bill Wesley Frazier was one of many people that didn't believe Oswald did it and believed the shot came from the front as well. But many Book Depository employees thought the shot came from the front as well. So you had that. And then, the thing about Tippit is that I believe Tippit was the first Ruby. He was going to kill Oswald before Oswald was ever paraded in front of media and police. And we'd hear about the dead Oswald was this brave officer, J.D. Tippit, did it. I don't think Oswald killed Tippit, or if he did kill Tippit, I take Andy Purdy's notion on it. He killed Tippit out of self-preservation. Tippit wasn't some innocent officer. He was out of his patrol area, okay? And I think that Oswald realized, and I think, to be honest with you, I think Tippit was part of the plot. I think he was the first Ruby. And when the first Ruby didn't work out, it didn't rub Oswald out. And Oswald gets before officers. He's blowing everything. He's telling everybody he had nothing to do with it. Of course, they took me in, because I went to the Soviet Union. They had to have Jack Ruby pull some favors. Hey, look we know about your family, your sister. We can do some things. And he did what he did there to rub him out. Now, Ruby was an FBI informant as well, and he had connections that bared observation. As we know from John Newman and others, there's no doubt that Oswald was intelligence connected. I'm not saying he was James Bond. I'm not ridiculous. He's a suit and tie, James Bond, with a little, drink there. No. But when you see low-level informants, low-level agents, they're often people who are the dregs of the earth. They often are very low income or poor. They often are in positions where they can be, we got your wife and your kids. We know what we can do to you. We can put the squeeze on you. We need you to do this, not do that. That's why he appeared to be a communist. Then he comes out, and joins, anti-Castro things and is pounding around with people that don't make sense. The Ledger, David Ferry, Guy Bannister, that whole nexus in New Orleans, that James Eugene and other people put together so well. So you had that. So as the motorcade leaves Dealey Plaza goes to Parkland Hospital. If Earl Rose does a proper autopsy, all bets are off. But guess what they did, Sean? All these stories came out. Again, it's on my YouTube channel. I got a loop of all these television, radio, newspaper reports saying an agent was dead. A Secret Service agent was shot and killed today, also with the president. What that did is that invoked federal jurisdiction over the case because, believe it or not, the murder of a president in 1963 was not a federal crime. It was a local Texas murder. That's what even Jim Lavelle said. This was a regular homicide in Dallas, as far as I was concerned. Well, when all these reports came out that a Secret Service agent was killed, a Secret Service agent being killed was a federal crime. So, now again, this is the tip to my hat to David Lifton, because David Lifton also thought this as well. I believe this cover story was put out. No agent was killed, by the way. I don't believe one was. But what it did do is for a few short hours that day, it gave the agents and the other people to say, hey, one of our brethren was killed. Hey, it's a federal matter now. We're taking the president's body because if Earl Rose does an autopsy, it's the end of the ball game. They're saying the right rear of the head's gone. This is an entrance wound. Dr. Perry, in fact, Alex Harris, a wonderful young researcher, he discovered this, but I have it on my YouTube channel. I credit him. He discovered more video of Dr. Malcolm Perry from that day. It's later on after the press conference that no one could find. The Secret Service took the press conference video and chucked it, put it somewhere. Well, on that same night, November 22nd, he's telling everybody the right posterior area of the president's head was missing, and he appeared to have what appeared to be an entrance wound in the front of the throat. But again, because people couldn't orient where Oswald was, and it was too soon, they couldn't put their stories together, they didn't realize you can't have someone from behind shooting from the front. So again, they leave, and it's like a hijacking. They steal the body, go on Air Force One. LBJ sworn in, didn't need to do that ceremonial. He's already the president due to the constitutional rules. He's already the president, but that's all pomp and circumstance. Let's get Sarah Hughes on the plane. Let's swear him in. There's talk about going to Walter Reed Army Hospital, but allegedly they just went to Bethesda and Bethesda alone. And I'm like 50-50 about whether it's chicanery or the body. I don't go too deep with it, but I got to admit it's compelling. David Lifton's and Doug Horn's, their work on the body alteration theory and stuff, I don't think it was some surgical success. I think it was what it boils down to is it could have been Roy Kellerman, some other people who did an off-the-record inspection of the president's body by going in there with their hands, as gory as this is. They were screwing things up. They were screwing the works. They were moving the brain to see if they could find, metal particles, and they're screwing up the wounds. They're making them larger and everything. I know it's gross. And they go to Bethesda. And again, this didn't come out until decades later. Most people thought, because the High Committee lied to us, they said, well, party's over, pals, conspiracy theorists. When they get to Bethesda, it's obvious. He's only shot from the rear, nothing else. But we have the Parkland personnel. I spoke to him, Gerald Custers from Pittsburgh, PA. He died in the year 2000. I have him on video twice. Bill Law and some other people, I work on their books with them, and we actually have them on video. Gerald Custer, the x-ray technician of Bethesda, saying the right rear of Kennedy's head was gone. I definitely think he was shot from the front. I definitely believe there was conspiracy, but this was all swept under the rug. The House Select Committee said that, in defiance of these Parkland Hospital claims, the people of Bethesda, about paraphrasing, believe that he was only shot from the rear. But because we had nothing to go on, it was like, darn, this is a bummer. For years, that Paul Hoke famously came out and said the House Select Committee squelched a lot of people's dreams when it came to conspiracy because of this, this, and this. Well, it was only until the 1990s the ARB came out and released those staff interviews of the people and their drawings that FBI agent Cyber and O'Neill showing the right rear of the head was gone. They thought the wounds looked doctored. The photos didn't look right. So what this was they got the jurisdiction. Then they came out and they said, oh, no agent was killed today. That was a mistake, but it was hours later. So the jurisdiction's gone, but it's too late. The body's out of Texas. They stole it already. So in fact, Henry Wade of Roe v. Wade fame and others were livid at the agents, at Kenny O'Donnell when had taken the body away. It should have stayed there. And if it stayed there, that's the end of the ball game. If J.D. Tippit kills Oswald, we have nothing to go on. We have no Oswald denials, nothing. Oswald is just this opaque caricature. He's nobody. I guess we'd have the New Orleans film. Maybe want to flesh that out later of him, Fair Play for Cuba film. But there would be no statements of him in custody. So, somebody asked this on a show I did before. So, Vince, are you trying to say that J.D. Tippit, not only was he involved in the conspiracy, could he have been a shooter? Yes. The logistics are, I definitely believe that J.D. Tippit could have been one of the people they saw on the knoll, could have been one of the fake agents. One of the big smoking guns in the case is the people that ran into people claiming to be Secret Service agents. And there's other people claiming to see officers. In fact, some reports came out in the last 5-6 years as assassination files were released. One person claimed they saw J.D. Tippit behind the grassy knoll and believed J.D. Tippit and Jack Ruby were involved in the conspiracy to kill Oswald, involved in the conspiracy in general. So that's what it is. It's a few people. A few people didn't like Kennedy's stance on Cuba and Vietnam, and the Secret Service didn't like his, alley cat morals. Got to keep in mind, the late 50s, early 60s, adultery was a scarlet letter. Now we joke about it. Let's turn on the paparazzi. There's another celebrity in Hollywood who's screwing around on his wife. Big deal. The divorce rate's 50-50. But back in that time, it was a scarlet letter to be divorced. You hung your head in shame. I'm getting a divorce. And these men were making very little money in the Secret Service. And they're married. They have kids at home they can't see. And I love President Kennedy, but his one fault was it's been exaggerated a little bit. But, he had rendezvous with women of the night and other women, starlets and whatnot. And some of these men held it against him. So I think on a macro level, it was about his views on Cuba, maybe Vietnam, but Cuba and civil rights. And on a micro level, it was his cavorting around. They're guarding hotel doors where he's in there with a Hollywood starlet and whatnot. So you had this nexus, this horrible nexus. You had the perfect city, Dallas. You had the perfect state, Texas. It connects. It basically blackmails LBJ because it happened in my home state. Damn it! What am I going to do? They're going to think I'm involved in this. So he had to cover up. They had to put it behind him. The '64 election was coming up. Vietnam War was going to become a real war, not just some backwater concern. And people moved on. They even said historians when the Beatles came along in February of '64, it was a way of distracting people from the Kennedy assassination and the sadness of it. But people just moved on. And it wasn't until investigative reporters and Mark Lane and Sylvia Martinet started to look at the details. And so
Vince, what made Oswald realize they were going to put it on him? How did that moment come to be?
I think when he left the Book Depository, he put 2 and 2 together. He's thinking, okay, they're going to stick it on me somehow. But because he heard the reports, the human reports, the radio reports, wanted to scuttlebutt all the people running around. It was just like a zoo of humanity saying things, radio reports, whatnot. The coup de grace was when he's walking and J.D. Tippit slows down his vehicle and wants to talk to him. I think at that point, he's realized he's here to kill me. He's going to kill me. J.D. Tippit's going to kill me. And the Andy Purdy House Select Committee believes this to be the case, that Oswald killed Tippit so Tippit wouldn't be the first Ruby and snuff him out. So they get him at the Texas Theater. He's going around person to person, Oswald is. Looks like he's looking for a contact. He's sitting beside people, total strangers. He moves to another person. And he goes, I'm not resisting arrest. I'm not resisting arrest. And they put him away, and he finds there's multiple wallets and multiple IDs. You're the cop. You figure it out. To get him back to the police station, he's adamantly denying everything about it. So what's the political cause for this assassination? It's meaningless. It's basically a homegrown murder of a man in a bar. Because Oswald's not admitting to any political ideology. He's just not even admitting he did it. So they realize, oh my God, when he leaves the police station, when he goes over into the lockup, it's over. He's going to testify. He's going to have counsel. He's going to have days, weeks, months to figure this out and maybe even come out of a limited hangout that he was involved, but he wasn't the shooter or the only shooter or whatnot. So Jack Ruby, they put the screws on him like he did to Oswald. Oswald had a pretty young wife and 2 little daughters, one just born. That was the screws on Oswald. The screws on Ruby was his beloved Dachshunds, his dogs, and his business and his family. He had a sister and whatnot, and a brother, and a livelihood and a reputation in Dallas. He was a wannabe, whatnot. He was also a wannabe mafia gopher. And they just said, hey, we need you to do this. We can't do it. We're the Dallas police. We're not going to rub him out. I mean, can we get any more obvious that it's us behind us? We got to have it look like just some big. And then the thing is, Ruby had no feeling for the Kennedys. That was all bull. That was invented by his attorney, Tom Howard. You did to spear Jacqueline Kennedy at trial. Jacqueline Kennedy wouldn't have been there. It's ridiculous. Jacqueline Kennedy never would have been in a trial unless she was a spectator hidden away in the corner somewhere. She wouldn't have testified. There would be no reason for Jacqueline Kennedy to testify. And there's no his Jack Ruby strippers who worked at the Carousel Club and others came forward. Jack Ruby wasn't political. Jack Ruby didn't care one dime about the Kennedys. So you had all that. And you also had Jack Ruby made visits to Cuba, visits to Santo Trafficani's jail cell. And what was a tie-in with the CIA and the mafia plots to kill Castro. And again, you had Jack Ruby as a mafia informant. And again, it's not the FBI as an agency. It's not the CIA as an agency. It's just a few rogue people that didn't want to see Vietnam War not come to fruition and end. They wanted Cuba back, darn it. They wanted to open the casinos back in Havana. They didn't want the civil rights. They didn't want this Negro-loving president. They didn't want the civil rights bill that all the scuttlebutt is. There's going to be this big civil rights bill. So even though LBJ enacted it, it was a JFK act. And so Texas was the perfect time. A man in a building shot at a man in a car. Make us look like a fluke. People were so naive back then, too. They made Clint Hill out to be a hero. Oh, Clint Hill, the bravery of the Secret Service. Nothing about the fact he's one of the agents freaking night before, and he got into the car and it was too late. Brutally honest. If you're a brutally honest defense attorney, you'd say, Mr. Hill, you got there when it was over. Kennedy's head's ripped apart. He's already fallen into the limousine. Jacqueline Kennedy got in and out of the car of her own volition. If you look at the Zapruder film, they never touch hands. Clint Hill reaches out. She gets in and out of the car. It had nothing to do with Clint Hill. But it's a sentiment people want to have. At least he did something. He tried, but again, it's and then Clint Hill, lately, he's trying to fudge things. For years, he said the back of the head was gone. Clint Hill said it for decades. Now he's moving it to the side. Why is he moving to the side? Because he got the scuttlebutt from researchers that you realize you're saying the back of the head's gone. That means Kennedy was shot in the front. Now you see documentaries from the last few years. Clint Hill said it was a large side wound. So that's what's going on now. It's why it's still a battle, even though it's 60 years later. I got a couple old agents out there. I got three: Paul Landis, Clint Hill, and Gerald Blaine, who are going on book tours, documentaries, news spots on CNN and Fox News, and they're spouting their. It just makes me want to punch the TV when I hear them say President Kennedy didn't want us on the back of the car. That's why Oswald was a success, and yeah, it's just ridiculous. Yeah.
How long was Oswald incarcerated for before he was wiped out? And is there any documented conversations he had with lawyers, phone calls, cellmates? What was his narrative while he was incarcerated?
Yeah, there was allegedly I forget his first name, Elrod. He came out in 1996. There was even an Oprah Winfrey special about his book. This guy, John Elrod, I think it was, claimed to be a cellmate of Oswald, and Oswald said some very amazing pro-conspiracy things. But Elrod's legitimacy is open to question, so no one really grafted on that too much. What happened was Oswald's in custody again from 22nd till he's killed the 24th. He adamantly denies everything. It's ridiculous. I need a lawyer, whatnot. Well, someone named John Hurt, different spellings, could have been H-U-R-T, but phonetically it was John Hurt or Heard, contacted Oswald, wanted to speak to Oswald. No, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Sorry for your listeners. It was the other way wrong. I think it was Oswald trying to contact him. That's right. And one Dallas police phone operator kept the record of it. It turns out this gentleman exists. He may even still be alive. He recently passed away. Author Jim Douglas of JFK and the Unspeakable actually spoke to him. He had a military intelligence background. He didn't understand why on earth does Oswald want to contact him. And I say to you and your listeners, why indeed? Why would little old Oswald, if he's just a lone nutty assassin, why is he contacted someone from North Carolina with military intelligence background? Why indeed? Why is he looking for John Abt? I think it's A-B-T is how you spell the last name. John Abt, a famous pro-communist sort of people that are cast as communists as his attorney, his spokesman. They never gave him attorney. When he tried to contact Ruth Payne to get an attorney for him, she didn't do anything for him, left him out to dry. In fact, I discovered this in 1996, showed people at a conference in 1996 in Washington. They were flabbergasted. It's pretty common knowledge now because people go on YouTube and say, look at the resemblance. But Michael Payne, Ruth Payne's husband, looked remarkably like a slightly skinnier, slightly taller Oswald in 1963. It's scary. People see Frontline version of Michael Payne in 1993. And so they go, oh, he doesn't look anything like Oswald, but he was old and gray then. But if you see 1963 video, and it came out in 1991, I have it on my YouTube channel. I showed it in 1996. In fact, it was a funny moment at the conference in Washington, D.C. We had a couple people who weren't researchers. They were there for another conference. They thought we were all a bunch of nuts. We had them come in and watch the video. You know what they said when they saw Michael Payne? They said, why do I have to see this video of this Oswald? I have no interest in this. They thought it was Oswald, Michael Payne. So the bottom line is, in 1963, Ruth Payne, who got Oswald the job of the Book Depository, and she had intelligence connections with her sister in the CIA and whatnot. Her husband looked remarkably like Oswald. Could he have been the one that people said was Oswald at the Albert Bogard when he drives the car, when he's spouting off all this ideology, when people swore it was Oswald, but there's no way logistically he could have been there? Could have been Michael Payne, could have been other people, but Michael Payne. And so that's how I think they were able to frame him. Oswald came up on the ledger and he said, "Oh, this guy's next Marine. Oh, he served. He tried to defect to Russia. He was in there, Russia, with a Russian wife who has a curious background. Now he's back here. And he's in New Orleans. He's pro-Castro. He's anti-Castro. He's part of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. He's trying to get to Cuba via Mexico. Oh, this guy is just tailor-made for somewhere we're going to set up. It wasn't this Joe Jones nobody they set up to kill Kennedy. They got this. If they really wanted to kill Kennedy, they could have poisoned him at the White House. They could have had obvious multiple shooters just come on, just blow him away somewhere. But they did this because they wanted to, make it look like a lone wolf, but they wanted the lone wolf to have the kind of background to get people on sense to say, okay, we got to bomb Cuba back to the Stone Age. Okay, we need someone who's tough on Vietnam. We need someone who's tough on this whole, we can't, America first, baby. We got to have that ideology around the world. We can't have black people in control of the Civil Rights Bill. And Texas was perfect because it blackmailed LBJ. He realized his hands were tied to a certain extent because it was his home state. It looked pretty bad. A lot of people thought LBJ had something to do with it. To this day, you have a faction of people that still think LBJ had something to do with it. So I think LBJ was definitely involved in the cover-up. I don't think he was involved in the assassination. For a lot of times I did in the early days, but the evidence isn't there. In fact, Mac Wallace, it came out, Joan Mellon is a very pro-conspiracy author, debunked the whole thing about Mac Wallace. His fingerprints weren't there. He wasn't even in Texas at the time. That kind of does that. LBJ doesn't duck down in the limousine. That's silly. And just there's no hard evidence for it other than a feeling people have. But I definitely believe he was involved in the cover-up, no doubt about that. Him and J. Edgar Hoover. And J. Edgar Hoover was afraid of losing because, January 65 rolls around and Kennedy's reelected. Bye-bye Hoover. Hoover wanted to be director for life, and he actually was when he died in 1972 during Watergate. So him and LBJ were thick as thieves, literally and figuratively, and he wanted to still be the head of the federal government, the bureaucracy, the seat of government. So he wanted to pin it on Oswald. He did that all the time, all through his career. Bonnie and Clyde and all the gangsters of the 20s and 30s. He always wanted to come out and just, before anybody else had official prognostications, like, hey, it's whatever Hoover said. And I'm saying Oswald did it. But that day in phone conversations with LBJ, he's talking about the bullet business doesn't match. And we have reports of him that someone else might have impersonated him in Mexico. So, again, now back to the Secret Service for me. I'm not saying the Secret Service is an agency that had anything to do with this. I'm not even saying 98% or more of these agents are squeaky clean. All the rest of them were either following orders or just had a few bad apples. And I actually only have 3 bad apples, really. Bill Greer, the driver of the president's car, Emory Roberts, who was the shift leader in charge of the agents of the follow-up car, and Floyd Boring, the number 2 agent, but he was in charge of the planning of the Texas trip, but he was in Washington, D.C. at the time, so he wasn't physically there. He had the number 1 agent on his first vacation under Kennedy, and even Clint Hill and Gerald Blaine in their books admitted such. Now, I got this in 1994 from Sam Kinney during an interview that this is Gerald Bain's first vacation. I was like, wow, that's an amazing coincidence. I'm thinking to myself, and they admitted in their books that, yeah, there's a fluke of history that Gerald Bain was on vacation when Kennedy was killed. I'm like, oh, fluke of history, huh? Yeah.
Vince, you've got a ton of questions coming in. Have you got time to keep going out to some viewer questions?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So Charlie D'Angelo said, what if Zapruder was the final shooter? Right place at the right time.
All due respect, Zapruder wasn't a shooter. I don't know what to say about that. Abraham Zapruder, now, the good thing about him is Abraham Zapruder, people go to that WFAA footage and try to make it sound like, oh, he's saying that Kennedy's wound was more on the side and the rear and this, that, the other. But, Secret Service agent Max Phillips, when he obtained the films of Zapruder, says that Zapruder thought the shots came from behind him as well. And Zapruder, when he testified to the Warren Commission, he said, that there's evidence that the shots, there might have been more than one. And they said, we thank you for your films and your time, Mr. Zapruder. They didn't want to get into whatever Abraham Zapruder was thinking, but him as a shooter, no.
Spooky wants to know, Vince, do you think Operation Northwoods contributed to the assassination?
Good question. Yeah, I definitely think that's part of it. Operation Northwoods, A lot of those documents, I think, only came out during the Assassination Records Review Board. And what it was they were going to have a pre-9/11, 9/11 in Cuba. They were going to have this situation where it was going to look like Cubans bombed on innocent civilians. There was nobody in the plane. It was going to be like a drone. And now it's going to be the excuse to go invade Cuba. So I think what happened was in Dallas, they did the same thing. They had a Cuba-connected Oswald. It's going to look like a Cuban mercenary, somebody who loved Castro, killed Kennedy, and hoping that would set the wheels in motion either through public outrage or the military or both, or the intelligence community as well, to go there in Cuba and end it once and for all. The bad pigs didn't work. The Cuban Missile Crisis didn't work. So they're hoping, and they're trying to close down the camps as well in 1963. You're hoping Oswald, who was connected to New Orleans in those camps, David Ferry, Guy Bannister, would do the job for them too. Operation Northwoods is a stunning document. Yeah, basically what it boils down to is, it was a whole plan to get rid of Castro and Castro's Cuba via a plane being bombed. They were going to do some dramatic stuff, that they were going to have fake recorded screams of people that no one's on the plane, but it's going to look like it was blown out by Castro's Air Force. And it's a really telling document. It really makes you think, was that situation November 26, 1953, was there some sort of nexus there? So, yeah, I do believe there's something to it.
Question from Helena. CIA, Secret Service, military, mobile, LBJ, etc., all in or new. But who were the puppet masters, I wonder?
Well, besides my three suspects on the ground, so to speak, Greer, Boring, and Roberts, Paul Paterni was the deputy chief of the Secret Service, the number 2 agent of the Secret Service. Paul Paterni served in the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. He served with Ray Roca and James Jesus Angleton. Those two are pretty much suspects in the assassination for many authors and researchers. So he's the number 2 agent of the Secret Service, deputy chief. Interesting thing about Paul Paterni, I detail in my first book and come my other books. He's one of the first people to get to the presidential limousine where the skull particles, the bullet fragments are found. Someone with that kind of bizarre background, someone connected to James Jesus Angleton, Ray Roca, is there in the limousine, literally with his hands. Who's the other gentleman? Lloyd Boring, another one of my suspects. They get the limousine of their own volition before anyone else is there. So I say, if anything was moved, tampered with, switched, or taken out of the evidence pool, those two are pretty suspicious to me. So that's on the Secret Service level. Now, on CIA level, obviously, Alan Dulles, former director, became the one of the members of the Warren Commission. So you had that as well. And then you had Cord Meyer. Couldn't think of the name for a second. Cord Meyer, who was, Mary Pinchot Meyer's former husband and whatnot. And, Mary Pinchot Meyer had affairs with JFK. Well, Cord Meyer was livid at Kennedy for many reasons. And I think Cord Meyer was definitely a player in the assassination from the CIA's point of view. See, it's a matter of renegade, former and then current agents. It's only a handful. So there's 2 right there. Maybe James Jesus Angleton, or he was just involved in the cover-up. J. Edgar Hoover, I believe, like Mark North's book, Act of Treason, I think that he got wind of conspiracies, threats, plural, to Kennedy, and he just let them slide. He was hoping that one of them would succeed. Like, maybe one of these will succeed. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to alert my Secret Service brothers. Like James Riley was a former former FBI agent who became director of the Secret Service. And J. Edgar Hoover looked down on anybody who left the FBI for another bureaucracy. So all it took was a few men in certain quarters of power. Hoover, you had Alan Dulles in the Warren Commission. You had LBJ, who didn't want any of this conspiracy nonsense to come out. He had a election to win in 1964. He had a war to propagate in 1964 as well, the Vietnam War. We had to move on, get on with our lives, so to speak, and that's what this is about. So it wasn't like a gaggle of people. It was just a handful from each one who pulled levers. And again, the Secret Service is action through inaction. Secret Service isn't shooting him. Just a few agents sat back and, okay, a couple seconds, it's over. And they do what they do. So it doesn't even look ostensibly like anything's wrong until, again, people got to realize it was only until decades later all this information came out. And little old me in the wilderness, amateur me, works for a living, even though I write books and I'm doing okay. Still, I'm not exactly like I have subpoena power and I'm part of the federal government. I did this all on my own dime. Again, I work for a living. I'm in this for the money. And it cracks me up, Sean. All these people say, "Oh, you conspiracy buffs are in this for the money." No, most of us work for a living and we're breaking even. The people making the money are the Posners, the Bugliosis, all these people that write pro Oswald did it books. Clint Hill's made millions off his books. Gerald Blaine has made millions off his books. Simon & Schuster's the biggest book company in the world. In fact, there's going to be a movie about Clint Hill's life coming out, or you can catch your breath on that. Paul Landis, that silly book about the final witness. He was not the final witness. He's coming out with a documentary on his life. Cha-ching. So these people claim, and they also says government pensions and book signs are touring the world. You see them eating caviar and sipping champagne and pears and that. Give me a break. It's the people who believe Oswald did it are making the money, not us. It's just ridiculous if people do. Are you in it for the money? Yeah. Meantime, I'm clocking in 9 to 5. Yeah, I'm really in for the money. Yeah. So, yeah.
and viewers, we've got a playlist now of all of our JFK videos, and we did an episode on Angleton. James Jesus Angleton. Fascinating.
Ooh,
so that's in the description box as well. Next question is from William. What about the William Cooper theory that the guy that shot him was in the car, that Jackie wanted to get out of the car? That's why he didn't know.
No, it's the most ridiculous theory ever on the case. Silly. What happens? That William Cooper, I actually have his video on my channel too. It's called The Most Ridiculous Conspiracy Theory Ever, and a couple other people that propagated it as well later on. They had a grainy version of the Zapruder film. Really bad grainy. In power of suggestion, Roy Kellerman's head, his forehead, the bro cream that men used that made it shiny back in the 60s and 70s, that looks like a pistol to people in this poor quality of the Zapruder film. Meantime, no credible witnesses ever saw Greer turn around and fire. He didn't turn around and fire, but it's this thing that it's the theory that won't die. I don't want to talk hyperbole and say it's every week, but it's darn close to every week. I get an email or message from somebody that I think that driver shot Kennedy. Vince, get it all the time. It's the theory. The next theory won't die is George Hickey in the follow-up car accidentally shot Kennedy. What that was is I spoke to this gentleman, Howard Donahue, the late Howard Donahue, wrote the book Mortal Error, and later on, what's his name? McLaren, I forget his first. Ian McLaren, who did the next one, The Smoking Gun, the Reels documentary, claimed that George Hickey, that Oswald was shooting and George Hickey got the AR-15 and it slipped and fell and the fatal shot. What that stems from is Howard Donahue worked for the government. He loved his government. He didn't want to believe that there was a conspiracy. So what he said is, I have ballistics evidence that shows Oswald could not have fired the fatal headshot. Great stuff. Ballistics evidence that shows that Oswald didn't do it. He ties it to a Secret Service accident to give the benign reason behind it. So it's still Oswald had to let him get a life. But this poor Secret Service agent, needless to say, George Hickey adamantly denied it. Everybody in the follow-up car adamantly denies it ever happened. It's a subject. The Bronson film, it's poor, but you can see from the other end of the street, George Hickey doesn't stand up and fires AR-15. But these are sexy soundbite answers to the case. In other words, you have to read all these books, study all these films, look at all these documentaries. But in this soundbite social media world we live in, these theories are sexy and short. Driver did it. That solved it for me. George Hickey did it. Nope, that solved it for me. They don't want to dig into the nooks and crannies and the minutia of it because it's a lot. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. It's tough to say, okay, Vince, who killed Kennedy? That's why I wrote the book Honest Answers, because I admit I think if we can prove there's a conspiracy, that's the great news. The bad news is, to a legal certainty, we can't name definitively who did it. We have deep suspicion that it's the CIA, rogue element of the CIA, et cetera, and I lay that out in the book. But can I go into a court of law and say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I believe Allen Dulles and the CIA killed Kennedy? No, I don't have it. No one does. But we can prove there's a conspiracy, and that's the good part. That's why I wrote the book Honest Answers. I wanted to show what we can say and what we can't. So that's why this case will never die, and why it's very unsatisfying. It goes around in a circle. We can prove the conspiracy, but when people want to go, oh, who did it, Vince? Who did it? We're a little bit less sure on that. So it just goes in an unsatisfying circle. So there you go.
So you got two questions about Ruby. Shark wants to know if you've got any more about Ruby, and Archie wants to know if Oswald knew Ruby from way back.
Well, again, pointing to this video that was discovered only the last 5 years or so, ABC footage. Oh no, this is in case it's CBS. I'm corrected. Dan Rather, still kicking. Dan Rather interviewed William Weston, I think he was one of the magicians who worked for Ruby's Carousel Club, came out and told the world he saw Oswald and Ruby together in the Carousel Club. He says, I'd never forget a face. It was definitely Oswald. He says, I can't say they were best buddies and whatnot, but there was a level of recognition there. And I have that on my YouTube channel as well. I'll highlight it after we're done with this, and I'll show people that, yeah. And Dan Ryder's like, wait, you're telling me you saw Oswald and Ruby together in his club, the Carousel? He goes, yes. And he's real matter of fact about it. He's not extrapolating up. He even admits maybe it's just some tremendous coincidence, but he was there, and it looked like Jack Ruby knew him. As we know, right before Ruby shoots Oswald, there's some really compelling frames of the newsreels. It looks like they're locking eyes. It looks like they knew each other. Now, there's also some reports that came out I alluded to about 10, 15 minutes ago that were released in 2017, 2018, thanks to, I guess, the government, Trump, whatever, the files. And there's reports from people that claim that Oswald and Ruby knew each other, that Oswald, Ruby, and Tippett knew each other, and they're involved in conspiracy. And, Ruby didn't live far from Oswald in Oak Cliff. So that's the other thing, too. And then you had people less credible, Beverly Oliver, and that claim, I don't want to cast aspersions, but I don't believe Beverly Oliver was the babushka lady. And I see that's the other thing you get in this case. You get some people, levels of credibility up and down, depending on who we're citing. You kind of got to put a grain of salt. Dennis Morris that came out with a tremendous video and research that shows that Beverly Oliver was the babushka lady. I recommend anybody check out Dennis Morissette, the babushka lady on YouTube, and it's definitive. It's not her. It's some unknown lady. So look, 60 plus years later, the real babushka lady's out there who took still photos, not a movie camera, still Browning camera photos, and we've never seen them. And she was a witness to the grassy knoll. So
Brad is asking whether a Mauser rifle was found in the building.
Yes, very compelling. Again, I keep citing my YouTube channel, but it's free and people can go to it. See, I'm not making a dime. I don't make any money off my YouTube. It's not monetized either. People can go for free. And I have a video. I think if you put Mauser in the search engine, you'll come up, and it's ABC, NBC, CBS, and radio reports are all going about finding a German Mauser. A German Mauser was found, on and on and on. All these reports. And Roger Craig swears, and there's a couple other people, Eugene Boone and the other officer eludes me now. There's like three of them that swear it was a Mauser. In fact, Roger Craig says that stamped right on the barrel was 6.5 millimeter. He said it was definitely a Mauser, but then it morphed into Oswald's, Mannlicher Carcano 6.5 millimeter. Now, could it have been they found another rifle? Yes, it could be. Same what I said earlier about Oswald's rifle was used, but Oswald didn't shoot it. It could very well have been that another one of the rear shots came from another window of the Book Depository, and the Mauser was used, but then that morphed into one gun. Like I always say, there's a lot of early mistakes that are made by the media, no doubt. We see it today. There's some shooting, and some people claim there's two people that it'll morph into one. But there's also been cases recently where a lot of people are suspicious that there's very credible evidence that people saw a second person, credible evidence, and it's never followed up, and it just becomes one shooter. So again, it could have been that there was a German Mauser found, but that was taken out of the equation. They went sticking on one man, 3 bullets, one man. They can't have anything more than that. So,
Danny wants to know, who was the lady that claimed that Oswald ran past her in the stairwell of the building?
Nobody. It's the opposite. They claim they didn't see Oswald, see or hear Oswald. Barry Ernest wrote a fabulous book called The Girl on the Stairs, and it's names kind of elude me right now. I'm trying to think of her name. There's 2 ladies and their boss. This way. Who cares about their names right now? There's 3 women who worked in the Book Depository who said they didn't see or hear Oswald come down those steps. Keep in mind, those steps were old, crickety, very loud. You couldn't go gingerly down the steps. And also each staircase went to a landing on the 5th floor. Then you had to go around to go to the landing and go down and go to the landing on the 3rd floor, then the 2nd floor. He wasn't seen or heard. And then they saw Roy Truly and Officer Baker come up the steps. So they never saw or heard Oswald go down, but they sure saw and heard Truly and Baker go up. It's more food for thought, more proof that Oswald was where he said he was, in 2nd floor lunchroom sipping a Coke. When Baker said, "Who is this man?" He was totally calm. Oswald showed no sign of, "Oh my God, this is it." and truly says it's all right. He works in the building, and other people thought this too. Could Baker have been another Ruby, so to speak? He's drawn his gun on a man drinking a Coke. He's no threat to him. He has no weapon in his hand. Did Truly screw up Baker's opportunity to rub out Oswald before Tippett did, and then ultimately it fell on Ruby to do it? It's definitely food for thought. It definitely is. And the sequence of events is, so to answer his question, no, it's not they didn't see or hear. They didn't see or hear Oswald go on steps. So.
Question from Julesy. Is it true JFK's brains were switched before autopsy because toxins were in the second bullet that hit? In case the bullet didn't kill him, the toxins would?
Second part, you can disregard the toxin part. But was JFK's brain switched at the risk of sounding like a National Enquirer tabloid story, silly story? Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. Doug Horn of the Assassination Records Review Board came out with books Inside the ARB, and even George Lardner, who believes Oswald did it, very compellingly believed in 1998 there's evidence of 2 brain examinations. In other words, the real brain of JFK is examined, and it's showing he's shot from more than one location, front and the rear. This bullet evidence shows what shows. And then another brain. Keep in mind, Bethesda has many brains. Many deceased people. It was a teaching hospital for forensics and whatnot. So they had many brains on file. I know it's not silly in a way. You think brains, but yeah, it's a medical school. My brother was worked for years as a male nurse, and he told me, they had several brains on file in the teaching area of the hospital. That's normal. And this is Bethesda, where a lot of people, sailors and whatnot, are brought their dead bodies, brought there for autopsy. They had plenty of brains. Who's going to know from a brain? A male brain's a male brain. It's not going to really look different from millions of other people. So again, this is Doug Horn, Assassination Records Review Board member, who wrote this book, and George Lardner of the Washington Post gave it kudos. The evidence is compelling. It's in the interest of time. People have to read it. It's too long and drawn out. It just shows that Hughes, Boswell, and Fink did an autopsy on a brain. The brain's allegedly missing all these decades later. No one's ever found the brain and whatnot. There's stories it was buried with the body later on. But then they get another brain that's not infused, not sectioned, and it shows only damage from the front, not the rear. No rearward damage at all, which would be, it looks like he was only shot from the rear, not the front. But the photographer who took the photos of the brain says the brain was sectioned. It's not sectioned in these photos. I used Ansco film, and this film is not Ansco. And they're all befuddled. And other people look at the brain. Seibert and anyone else says, that doesn't look like the brain. At least half of it was blown out. In fact, Sam Kinney said the brain was blown out. I had it all over my windshield and my left arm. People see the Zapruder film, and there's a mass of brain and blood goes rearward. And we're trying to say a nearly intact 1,500-gram brain was found. Give me a break. That's almost like somebody laid a clue in there for people. The 1,500 is like the upper echelon of a perfectly intact brain for a male, and that's the brain that was autopsied officially. Yeah, but it wasn't until decades later in the 90s this was discovered through testimony of the still living medical people. When they looked at the films and photos, or the photos, I should say, of the brain, he said, that's not the way it looked. That's not even my film that I shot of the brain. That's not the kind I used. So there you go.
Wow. What is your opinion of the JFK movie?
Flawed but brilliant, indispensable. As a movie, it's terrific. I give it an A+, one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah, I know I'm biased, but still, I'm not biased because there's a lot of assassination movies that are awful. Parkland's awful, Jackie's awful, Executive Actions for Amateur Hour, 1973's Calling. Oliver Stone's movie is brilliant. It's also brilliant in another way. Yes, it's got flaws. Yes, he morphed some people together. There's some dubious sources, but the essence of his movie is correct. That there was a conspiracy of multiple shooters. Did a brilliant job putting that together. And actually, if it wasn't for Oliver Stone's movie JFK, we wouldn't have had all the millions of files that have been released. We wouldn't have had the Assassination Records Review Board. We wouldn't have had many books written. We would have been stuck in the 80s if it wasn't for Oliver Stone's movie. We'd be stuck in theories. There'd be nothing to back up anything. But because of the movie, people wrote to their congressmen, their senators. They wanted those millions of files, taken out of the archives. We want to see these, and the stuff has come out for like little old me, for example. It's showing all these prior motorcades. A lot of motorcade records were destroyed in 1995 by the Secret Service. Another one of my smoking guns of nefarious activities. The Assassination Records Review Board said, don't destroy these records, and they destroyed them anyway. What were they? Specific motorcade records for Kennedy's trips in the fall. What has survived is damning to the Secret Service because it shows multi-story building rooftops guarded, agents on the rear of the car, etc. So they tried to do what they could. But yeah, the JFK movie, superb. Yeah.
Do the archives possess photos, videos of the autopsy?
Yes, they do. They have the official collection of the photos. We have bootleg photos, thanks to David Lifton and Harry Livingstone and some other authors. It was from the late Mark Crouch, who got them from the late James Fox, who was a Secret Service employee. We have bootlegs of some, but certainly not all the photos. People like Dr. Gary Aguilar, Dr. David Mantic, and several others got permission from the Kennedy family sometimes, several times, many times, to go to the archives, and they can't take photos and films. They can only observe them. But they said that, like the mystery photo of looks like a real bad cavity of Kennedy's head, like it's all open. Well, Dr. Mantic and others said that's the smoking gun photo right there. That is the rear of Kennedy's head opened up. In fact, actually, when the medical people initially did an inventory, I should say, of the photos, they said that was depicted the rear of Kennedy's head. Harold Weisberg even said, "Oh, really?" Then later on, they said they were mistaken. It was actually from the other angle, and they were wrong. Yeah, sure. But the bottom line is, yeah, there's much better quality films, photos, and whatnot in the archives, but they're only available through. And what I've been hearing now is the Kennedy family doesn't even let anybody see them anymore. Thank God, Mantic and Aguilar and a couple others, Michael Chesser, did what they did and made the observations, because I think now no one's going to be able to see them. Dr. Weck did. Now he passed away, and just people, circling the wagons. But yeah.
Are you going to laugh at this question? Is it preposterous, the magic bullet theory?
Oh, yeah, that's the whole thing's silly about the magic bullet. But, again, ballistically, that bullet had to trace to Oswald's gun. Imagine if that bullet didn't trace to Oswald's gun. My God, but it does. How brilliant and how convenient. The bullet is in near pristine condition, other than the end is flattened a little bit. But still, it looks like it was shot into cotton wadding, as Dr. Weck and others showed many times. It looks like one of the bullets that was fired into cotton or into water tubs. When they showed bullets that actually hit bones, they're all deformed as you would normally expect. And also the traveling of the single bullet is strange credulity. Now, the funny thing is Secret Service connection to that. Not only do they have the bullet, initially they're the ones who got it from Parkland Hospital, Richard Johnson, Agent Johnson. Paul Landis came out with a major best-selling book a couple years ago called The Final Witness. And he's claiming he found the single bullet in the limousine, but it's a very unsatisfying book, very bait and switch. 95% of the book has nothing to do with the assassination, and a little bit it does is very disappointing. It doesn't really reveal anything. I can imagine somebody off the street's probably confused. I don't understand what he's trying to tell me, other than he found the bullet. Okay, what's that mean? Paul Landis doesn't spell out the ramifications of this, but for people that do know, the ramifications are, we have the bullet found here, but the bullet was supposedly found in the stretcher by Daryl Tomlinson. Then, there's other stories about bullets being found and whatnot. So there's definitely something there, but Paul Landis just I think it could have been an 88-year-old man writes a book because he knows it's going to be a massive bestseller, which it was. And he's trying to confuse the public because for years, Paul Landis didn't say anything about finding a bullet. Now, all of a sudden, he's claiming he found a bullet and he suppressed the memory or just didn't want to come out and say it. I don't know.
Were any of the Secret Service remanded or fired? Usually they get promoted in situations like this, don't they?
Yeah. None were reprimanded in any way. None were fired in any way. Several were promoted. Clint Hill drank the night before and failed. He got a medal, presidential medal, Treasury medal, and he became the head of the White House detail and assistant director of the service, and was able to retire since 1975. For 50 years, this man has been retired, having a nice government pension. He's written now 4 books on his own with his now wife. Clint Hill was born in 1932. His wife was born in 1964, a couple years before me. His sons are older than her. They got married, and she's now going to control his estate when he passes and gets all his money. But just a coincidence there, folks. But she co-wrote all his books, and now he's claiming under her tutelage, the wound from the rear is now on the side. And all this. Now he never blamed Kennedy for the agents not being in the back of the car. He used to say for years, "It's my fault. I should have been there. I should have been there." Now he's saying Kennedy didn't want us on the back of the car. See what I mean? It's all about cha-ching money. It's all about trying to protect their view in history, the hero. And I always say, people like Art Godfrey, one of the shift leaders of the White House detail that I interviewed, tremendous guy. He was Saving Private Ryan, before Saving Private Ryan. He won a whole bunch of medals in Italy and Yugoslavia. He didn't get a medal for almost doing something. He did something. He saved men under gunfire and whatnot. Clint Hill lost his charge. President Kennedy was killed. Jacqueline Kennedy got in and out of the car of her own volition when it was all over. Yet he's awarded a medal, but we'll just forget about you drank the night before. It was grounds for dismissal. See what I mean? It's all about that. So, no, to answer the question, I can't ever answer anything short. Yeah, no, there was nothing, no ramifications whatsoever.
Parallels with the attempts on Trump.
Yeah, I do. I was flabbergasted. In fact, small world indeed, as I lay out in the intro to my latest book on the Chicago plot. The shooter was from my hometown. Thomas Crooks was from Bethel Park. I can get in my car and drive. It's about like a 2-minute drive away in my same hometown. My mom passed away in November of 2023. He worked at the same skilled nursing home as her. But beyond those amazing coincidences and whatnot, they had a counter sniper team on the adjoining rooftop looking at Thomas Crooks on his rooftop. He should have been taken out much longer. He should have got an opportunity to get on the roof to begin with an AR-15. Everybody in real time. Trump speaking. You can hear Trump speaking in real time. And also, there's someone on the building with the roof with a rifle. He has a rifle. He's talking in real time. Nothing's being done. He's able to actually get there and get was like an inch away or whatever from blowing Trump's head off. Only then did the counter sniper team take him down. It's goes to show you, even with counter sniper teams and rooftop surveillance, there was a breakdown, and it definitely is food for thought. Were some of these agents pro-Biden? Were some things slipping because they didn't want Trump to win the election? I'm no fan of Trump. That's another story. So I don't like the man at all. But I don't want anybody dead. I don't want anybody to be killed. I want everybody to live their lives harm-free. He's duly elected. It is what it is. Just disagree with him with ballots, not bullets. And that's basically what happened here. So the Secret Service, tremendous breakdown. Now, unlike the Kennedy assassination, and Trump wasn't even killed, there were ramifications here. There were some people that were reassigned, let go. So some heads rolled here. But even that was kind of hushed up. There wasn't like big congressional hearings. Nothing really kind of glossed over, to be honest with you. It's pretty crazy, but yeah.
Is it true that supposedly JFK had an affair with Claude Mayer's wife?
Yes, it is true. Yeah, Mary Pinchot Meyer definitely did. Unlike Marilyn Monroe, which has been greatly exaggerated, JFK might have had a tryst, maybe, but it seemed like more and more the credibility of the witnesses are they're all a bunch of Beverly Olivers, no credibility, and there's no hard evidence of it either, no pun intended. But yeah, Mary Pinchot Meyer was definitely lover of JFK. And ironically, he visited the Pinchot estate in September of 1963. Something I didn't even bring up real quick. Driver agent Thomas B. Shipman, who, like Bill Greer, was one of the driver agents for Kennedy. One of the last trips he made was to the Mary Pinchot estate. He died October 14th, 1963 of an alleged heart attack at Camp David. That allowed Greer to drive Kennedy in Texas. So Thomas Shipman, a fit fiddle agent, passes an annual physical. He dies October 14th. It wasn't until little old me in 1999 discovered this in a fluke. In the interest of time, people can see my books and the YouTube video I have on this about this. It's incredible. It was only when I discovered it that people started to say, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden the former Agents Association put his name on the list of agents that passed away. Since the 19th century, thousands of agents have come and gone. There's only 38 men and women who've died in the line of duty. He's one of them. He's the only one from the Kennedy days. He's also a month before the assassination. Other than some obscure newspaper articles that came out because I paid like $100 to get them on newspaperarchives.com, nothing was said by JFK, Pierre Salinger. Nothing was said in the major newspapers that this agent died at Camp David. Yet 10 years later, an agent, Cliff Dietrich, dies during the Nixon administration. President Nixon gives a heartfelt eulogy. Pat Nixon and the daughter, they go visit the funeral home, and there's big articles about it. Yet an agent dies and nothing's said. And at Camp David, of all things, and again, that allowed Greer to drive Kennedy. So,
and just to clarify for the viewers, as chief of the CIA's International Organizations Division, Claude Mayer had regular meetings with JFK and his staff.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he did. In fact, he had one on the day Thomas Shipman was buried. I have it in my book. On the day Thomas Shipman, the agent, was buried, Claude Meyer had a meeting And I have the meeting little list of that in my book. Yeah.
Brad is wondering why LBJ's illegitimate son passed away.
Yeah, he had some sort of illness or ailment or something like that. There's a lot of it's Madeline Brown. Was it her son? Was it not? And so it could have been someone else. I forget the name of the attorney. Could have been the father instead of LBJ. That's really like murky. Yeah.
Did Jim Garrison get it right? Assassination plot.
He got a lot wrong, but he got a lot right. Let's put it that way. We owe Jim Garrison a lot for what he did with the David Ferry, Guy Bannister, Clay Shaw nexus, and focusing on New Orleans and the intelligence connections, and how Oswald wasn't what he said he was, or wasn't portrayed by the Warren Commission. We owe him a debt of gratitude. We also owe him a debt of gratitude for bringing a criminal case, invoking a conspiracy. The jurors thought there was a conspiracy. They couldn't tie Oswald to it. He's the one who got this Zapruder film freed and showed it to a jury for 1975. And Geraldo showed the Zapruder film. He showed the Zapruder film in the courtroom, and people were flabbergasted. It looked like Kennedy was shot from the front, but they couldn't tie Clay Shaw to it. So warts and all, some of the mistakes he made, shooting from the hip and whatnot. Garrison did some good stuff. Yeah.
Did you say the late Mark Krause, the convicted former Fort Worth, Texas ME?
No, I don't know that one. Might have heard me wrong. Mark Krause? No, No.
All right, we have run out of time, my friend. There's still questions, but maybe we can get you back at some point. This has been phenomenally interesting for everyone.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it.
And for people with outstanding questions, there's links down there for Vince's YouTube channel. There's Amazon links. You can follow up, support his work. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion to the viewers, Vince?
Yeah, I actually had something to say to one person. Hi, Fred Litwin. Fred Litwin is a pro Oswald did a guy. I know he's watching this because he's become obsessed with everything about me and my writings and whatnot. But anyway.
We had Fred on a debate the other night, Vince.
Yeah, I know. Well, thank you to all your viewers and listeners. I really appreciate it. Fred's a character, but I know he's probably watching this. He's taking notes and whatnot. So anyway, I really appreciate it.
Are you challenging Fred to a live debate?
Nah, he doesn't know anything about the Secret Service. It wouldn't do me any, he doesn't focus on the Secret Service. He's all on Oswald or no Oswald. And, my area is more the Secret Service, so I wouldn't even bother. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for being so generous with your time. And I'm going to let you go and I'll sign off. Cheers.
Okay. Thanks. Hey, take care, Sean.
Take care, Vince. Thank you very much. That was phenomenal. That was definitely one of the most interesting people we've ever had on JFK. And please click on the links. Like I said, he's got a ton of books. Yeah, we've had a JFK debate. We had one recently. We may have had one a while ago. We've got a JFK playlist now in the description box. It's at the bottom of the description box. It's got all of our JFK videos. We did a lot a while ago, and we've just got back to it recently. Now, it is 6 p.m. UK here at 10 p.m. UK. In 4 hours, we have got Lee Harvey Oswald's workmate from the Texas School Book Depository building, Buell Wesley Frazier, coming on. He's not very technologically sophisticated, so I've got to call him up and hold the phone to the microphone and interview him and ask him questions. So bear with me. We had Ernst Titovitz on recently, who was Oswald's best friend in Russia. And that was something, training him up in StreamYard. But this is the best we can do tonight with the workmate. We're going to hold the phone to the microphone, get him to tell his story, and get your questions. And then in an hour, Bev is coming on at 7 until 10, doing a Saturday Psychic Live. Tomorrow night, we've got Lionel coming on, I think from 7 to 8, talking about US aid, Jay-Z, Elon, Trump, RFK. And then we've got John Wedger, ex-Scotland Yard detective, coming on for 2 hours. And then we've got Nick Leeson coming on, who was that movie Rogue Trader was made about him, whereby he bankrupted the Queen Elizabeth's bank. And it was starring Ewan McGregor, the movie. It's really good. So we've got tons of content tonight and tomorrow. I hope to see some of you in the chat. And thank you for all